Please take your seats. Our program will begin now. Please welcome to the stage Bloomberg's Malika Kapoor.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Bloomberg Business Summit at APEC here in Bangkok. Whether you're joining us virtually or you're in the room, thank you so much for making the time to be with us. Now, I arrived in Bangkok on Saturday evening, and when I got to this lovely city, I decided to go for a walk. And it was amazing to see that the restaurants were buzzing, that the roads were busy, and that the lights of this beautiful city were back on again. Because, let's face it, it has been a really difficult 3 years for all of us, and how APEC economies bounce back is really going to shape how the rest of the world recovers, right? Because one thing the pandemic showed us is this, that the global economy, the environment, global health, are all interconnected in ways none of us realized were so obvious and so deep. So our recovery and a bright common future really depends more than ever on how we partner and more than ever on interconnectedness. So against the backdrop of the first in-person APEC economic leaders meeting in 3 years, the Bloomberg Business Summit is bringing together leaders from all sectors to discuss next steps. At this point, I'd like to take a minute to acknowledge our presenting sponsors, Bangkok Bank, B. Grimm, and MQDC, and our supporting sponsor, Taiwan Excellence. I want you to know that you are all extremely vital to the conversations we're having today. We want you to be part of these conversations. So please do participate, and you can do that by sending us questions. You can submit questions for our moderators, and we'll also be polling you throughout the day, so do participate. And this is how it's going to work. I'm going to ask you to take out your phones, so go ahead, take out your phones, please. Keep them on silent if you can. And go ahead and scan the QR code you're seeing here. You'll also find the QR code printed behind your badges. So go ahead and do that. I'll give you a second. Yep, I see lots of phones. Nod your head if you've got the hang of it. Yes? Yes? Okay. And let's have a practice run, right? Shall we? So I'm going to present you with a very important and timely question. You have to promise me you'll answer it as honestly as you can. Ready? Here's the question. Who is going to win the World Cup? So if you're a supporter of the champions, I know what you might pick. I hope we have some people here who are willing to take a chance on the underdog. Wales, 7%. Yeah, growing a little, bouncing around. Okay, so this shows me you've got the hang of it. So this is all you have to do throughout the day when we poll you. And you can use the same mechanism to send in some questions as well to the moderators, right? So please do participate. And one final point, we are very active on social media, so you can join the conversation there as well. The hashtag is BBGAPEC. I will be back later in the day for a conversation about women in the workforce and another conversation about recovery in the travel and tourism sector. But we're going to kick off with an address by His Excellency the Finance Minister, after which I will sit down with the Minister for a conversation. Your Excellency.
Please welcome to the stage His Excellency Arkhom Termpittayapaisith, Minister of Finance of Thailand.
Very good afternoon, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to thank Bloomberg for inviting me to the Bloomberg Business Summit at the APEC leaders meeting. It is also my great pleasure to deliver the opening remark to the summit, held against the backdrop of the first in-person APEC economic leaders meeting in 3 years. Interconnection transform, the theme for this summit, carry with significant implications. Over the past few years, the world has seemingly been disrupted physically by the COVID-19 pandemic, technologically by the increasing digitalization, environmentally by the impending threat of climate change and political tensions. Now that we are trying to reconnect and stay connected, we have found that our interconnection has been transformed. The physical connection, which has resumed after COVID-19, was put under control, and travel restriction lifted, has come with a restructure in the tourism and the aviation sectors. Meanwhile, we have improved our digital connection, which has had a transformative effect on people's life, changing the rules of workplace, facilitating contactless transactions, both domestically and internationally, and allowing governments to deliver services and financial assistance to those in need. In Thailand, the success of e-wallet, the electronic mobile wallet application, widely used during the height of the pandemic, where its user can receive government subsidies to buy government and corporate bonds, and even to book vaccination appointments, serve as a testament to the power of digitalization in transcending even the most restrictive of barriers. And from what I learned during the 29 APEC finance minister, during 29 APEC finance, 29 APEC finance minister meeting held here in Bangkok last month. Other APEC economies have also leveraged digitalization to tremendous effect. It is obvious that digital transformation will be one of the keys to APEC shared prosperity in the years to come. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, while the digital interconnection might, in general, facilitate economic activities and render a positive effect on the world economy, there is the type of interconnection that brings with it some challenges. One such challenge is climate change, where its adverse impact can be felt even in places regardless of their contribution to the problem. Such global impacts demand global solutions. It is therefore of no surprise that sustainable finance, as well as the transition to a greener and cleaner economy, are issues that have been discussed at length in several fora, including in APEC. To name another challenge, the geopolitical tensions have put to a test the global supply chain, the resilience of which I believe would hold a place in our conversation in the next few years and require multilateral coordination to ensure the unhindered flows of goods and services, especially of the necessity such as food and energy. Ladies and gentlemen, our interconnection have benefited from positive disruption. It might have also been tested and interrupted by many challenges. However, our interconnection remains unbroken, and together we can do so much more. We all agree that our common issue in the years to come is a global consensus on the importance of sustainable finance in fostering a responsible growth. But how and how much such financing is not yet agreed upon. Therefore, I would encourage the public and the private sectors to live up to their words and pledge resources towards the global common good of green and sustainable future. In order to realize the effect of the digitalization, we have to make sure that no one is left behind. To do so, reducing the digital divide between different socioeconomic groups to bolster digital inclusion would be a great start. By making rooms for smaller but no less creative economic players, digital tools should serve to promote inclusive growth and provide a playing field for small businesses, which have contributed so much to the world economy. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, to this end, presenting a great opportunity to reconnect after a few years apart, this year Bloomberg Business Summit features a range of issues from broad economic outlook to specific focuses on healthcare and tourism, to the inclusion of women in APEC economies. There is a lot we can learn from this summit, and I hope you all enjoy learning about it as much as I do. I wish this summit every success and have a fruitful discussion. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. I'm going to jump right into it because time is limited, and I wanted to begin by talking to you about Thailand's economic recovery. Now, the recovery we're seeing has in large part been aided by a government economic stimulus package of roughly $4.5 billion. Most of these measures are now coming to an end. Do you have plans to extend these measures so that you can support the more vulnerable parts of society, or as you just said, to ensure that no one gets left behind?
Well, actually, for the past almost 3 years, right, during the pandemic, I think the fiscal policy has been playing an important part in the economy, while the monetary policy has playing down, okay, giving the room for the fiscal policies to work. So during the difficult time, particularly for the poor and people who losing their jobs during the pandemic, I think the government has helped a lot, both in cash transfer. At the same time, we need to stimulate domestic economy. So there are two measures. One is the cash handout program to help the people.
Yeah.
And secondly, to stimulate the domestic economy, particularly for the small vendor and for the people who have fixed income to spend more in domestically. It's not only the cash transfer and the stimulus package, but also we doing the projects on the traveling together to promote the domestic tourism, because all hotels and restaurants were closed at that time. So at least the Thai people had a chance to visit the countryside, spending time, the holidays in the luxury hotels with the government support of 40% of the room rate, as well as giving another voucher for spending. But I think since the government lifted all the COVID restriction, then I think the fiscal policy has to playing less role and giving the room for the monetary policy to work, which is the same as in other countries as well. So you would see that there's not only the Fed Fund, the Federal Reserve, they're raising the interest rate in the United States, but also we are carefully, the central bank, they're carefully raising the interest rate. So I think our government stimulus package, particularly broad-based, will be coming more targeting to the vulnerable groups. And now for example, especially the social welfare card will be the one that the one program that we are supporting. So it goes to the low-income people. At the same time, during this time, when the oil price has been hiking, then the government also support certain groups of the people who are using the energy.
How long do you expect these packages to run, this support?
I think for the broad-based stimulus package will be less and less, and then we let the economies to work, because the people just come back to work. The hotels open, and the factories open up to the more than 100% capacity. So people get more income right now, although some of them may not get the 100% as before the COVID. So people have the ability to pay. So let's the market work.
Yes, and rely less on stimulus measures. Now, you talked about central banks raising rates. What's your advice to the Bank of Thailand that has started raising interest rates, especially as household debt levels remain high, close to 90%, and the recovery we are seeing a recovery, but it remains fragile?
Well, central bank is more independent.
Yes.
Okay. So I cannot advise more, but
friendly advice.
We consult. We consult. I cannot say that how much the interest rate will go up, but when we talk to the governor of Bank of Thailand, that because the inflation in Thailand is basically from the cost side, the cost push. So the central banks understand very well, and we have to make sure that our economy fully recover. That's another factor, that apart from keeping our interest gap close to the international or the Federal Reserve rate. Okay, so I think they are concerned about the full recovery of the economy, and we agree that for the government spending should go to the more targeting group. You're talking about the household debt. Household debt is one of the, I think being in debt, I think is normal. It's normal life. If you don't have any debt, I think you are rich anyway. Okay.
Now,
so keeping the debt can be financed is the issue for us. So right now the Ministry of Finance, together with the state-owned banks, that we organize the kind of the forum, kind of act event to call for the people who has debt and people who are in non-performing loans to come to the bank, and then we help them to resolve restructure the debt. So extending the debt payment, I think one of the things, and cutting the sum of interest and the principal as well. So I think as long as you're able to pay back the debt, I think it's okay. And remember, 70% of the debt, 70% of the debt of household debt is go for the housing.
It's for housing.
Yeah, housing and the vehicles, which vehicles they use for so business, for small business. So we have to look at whether they have the assets or not. If they keep consuming, I think that's not good. That's not good.
Very quickly, I want to talk to you about inflation. We've been talking in just the last few minutes about how interconnected the world is now, and inflation is a huge global story at the moment. And here in Thailand also, inflation is shooting at around 6%, almost double the upper band of the central bank target. Is inflation something you are getting concerned about? Are you keeping an eye on it? And what might you do to bring it under control?
I think it's a global concern, and also in Thailand. But looking at the October is 6%, and for the whole year that we expect about 6.2, which is not so high. I think it's moderate. It's moderate. But the thing is, we have to help the people. So supporting the vulnerable groups is one of our policies. Apart from changing the behavior of the farmer, because the fertilizer cost has been going up. So turning from the chemical to the organic is one of the things that we are helping them.
And my last question, because I know we're out of time, is globally, the economic outlook is pretty grim at the moment. And everyone you talk to is talking about how they're fearful that we're headed for a deep global recession. Are you worried about that?
From the point of view of the government, of course we worry. But our policies, we are reversing the global trend. Okay? Because globally, there are two major economies, the United States and the European countries. But if you look at the Asian economies, our forecast for next year is higher than this year, mainly because of our performance in our export of goods. And look at the November figure, the foreign tourists coming to Thailand, reaching almost 9 million, which is the all year we expect 10 million. 10 million is 1/4 of the pre-COVID the number. So I think we're quite satisfied. We're quite satisfied with the number of the tourism and the export performance. So I think this will be one of the engine for the next year. So as compared to this year, I think, of course, many people are looking at the impact of the global recession, that Thailand will also face the same problem. Lower the economic growth is okay, but if you look at the trend is upward. Its trend is upward. The only thing is that the Chinese economy.
Yes.
There are two superpower, European countries and the United States. Of course, they expect the recession. But if you look at the Chinese economy, the only thing is the zero COVID policy. If the zero COVID has been lifted, then I'm sure that there are more Chinese people will come to Thailand, more and more. And I'm quite sure that the Chinese will also help when we're talking about a global supply chain disruption.
Yes.
And China is one of the countries who will supply all the electronic parts and components to the automobiles industry and the electronic industry. So I think as long as you keep the COVID restriction, I think that will be the big cost for the economy, which is the same as in Thailand over the past year, that economy and COVID must go
they work
together.
hand in hand, yes, of course. Well, as you
And
said,
in inflation, you're talking inflation, whether that will have the impact to the economy. I think, as I said, the inflation is very moderate, and the government has some measure to help the people. So it's not going to impact our GDP forecast. And apart from that, investment, domestic investment, particularly for the Eastern Economic Corridor, the major infrastructure will continue.
Well, inflation is moderate. There's an upward trend. So that's a good positive note to leave it on. Thank you so much for joining us, Minister.
Thank you. Thank you. Pleasure.
Great. You can go on that way.
Please welcome to the stage Peetathawatchai, Assistant Governor of Monetary Policy Group, Bank of Thailand, for a conversation with Bloomberg's Jeanette Rodriguez.
Yes.
Good afternoon to our audience. Good afternoon,
Good afternoon,
Kunpiti.
Janet.
Thank you very much for joining us. As the Honorable Finance Minister reminded all of us, monetary policy and fiscal policy goes hand in hand. And therefore, I'm delighted to have you for this very, very important conversation, especially given the fact that monetary policy is the hot topic in the world economy today. The elephant in the room, of course. We're talking about the US raising rates. We're talking about a slowdown in the largest economies in the world. So let me go straight into where Thailand is different, Kunpiti. While the rest of the world is talking about soft landings, the Bank of Thailand, of course, is talking about an economic takeoff. Could we start by you explaining to our global audience today, watching this on live streams, listening to this in the room, how Thailand views the global economic situation, especially the slowdowns in China and the slowdowns in the United States of America.
Yes, thank you. So actually, firstly, thank you for the invitation. It's my pleasure to be here, an honor to be here as well. You're right, monetary policy is a very hot topic right now. It's actually a very interesting time to be in central banks because now we have a lot of things to actually analyze and decide on. In terms of the global picture that you mentioned, there's a big global component of things that are happening, but there's also a very country-specific issues that are happening as well. In the global picture, of course, the inflation picture has a very much a global component, mostly from the energy price shock that we've all faced. But at the same time, the initial conditions and the starting point of countries are not the same. And you alluded to in the case of Thailand, why we are now trying to have a smooth takeoff as opposed to a soft landing. And this reflects the fact that our starting point from the COVID shock is a lot more later or delayed compared to the advanced economies, mainly because our economy relies a lot on tourism, which was completely pretty much shut off, and then it's only slowly coming back. As of the second quarter of this year, so back in June, we only had about 2 million tourists out of the 40 million that we usually get. Right now, we are around up to about 9 million. So you can see that the trajectory is that we're only starting to recover, and we're not going to reach the pre-COVID GDP level until like early next year or end of this year. So the global picture is now changing. It used to be quite positive. Now next year it looks a lot more challenging. So we will have to actually navigate through that. But domestically we have a pretty strong foundation, given that we have this inbound tourism coming, plus the domestic demand that's going to carry us forward. Yeah.
Kunpiti, you spoke about the starting point of the various countries are different. And surely Thailand is in a different place as well. But even in the US now, we're starting, the Federal Reserve officials are starting to talk about a moderation in their tightening. My country, India, is also going slow, relatively slow on interest rates. Surely you must be feeling a bit vindicated on your monetary policy stance.
No, I think every country has its own challenge, right? So I think what the Fed has done, have done what they needed to do, because they did start off with a pretty big inflation shock, which was unexpected. I mean, I think if you recall, not just the Fed, but everybody here in this room, all the markets, as of last year, was forecasting inflation for the US and the euro area around 4% of this year. Right now, it's going to be like around 8%. So it's pretty clear that there was some unexpected shocks that happened, and the degree of persistence of inflation in the advanced economies turned out to be more than people expected. So I think they have done what was needed to do. In the case of Thailand, I wouldn't say vindicated. It's more like we have been trying to apply a steady hand, really looking at the facts, incoming data, and the fact is, we do have a very different cyclical position than the other countries. In terms of our vulnerabilities to external developments, including the exchange rate, we are not that vulnerable given our limited exposure on foreign debt, that the pass-through to inflation is not that high. So we had this picture that we needed to first nurture the recovery, let the momentum gain, and then we could slowly, ease off the stimulus that was put on back in COVID. And so far, the overall picture has developed in the way that we had anticipated in the big scheme of things. So up to now, I think we are, comfortable, but I wouldn't say we are complacent because next year it's going to be a lot more challenging, I would say.
At what point would you think the economic recovery in Thailand has gained that momentum that you want? What would be the point that smooth takeoff is just about starting?
Yeah, I mean, just going back to the tourist numbers, for example, as of June, we only had 2 million tourists. So that was like the plane was on the runway. quarter 3, which is the numbers going to be released next week, I would think that would be should be a confirmation that we are now actually, launching or taking off. And then we expect to be in like full flight probably early next year. So that, as the finance minister mentioned, we actually one of the few countries that expect growth next year to be higher than this year. If you look at the world around and the IMF forecast, most regions, most countries actually have growth next year much lower than this year. So we are, gonna be in full flight probably next year.
Before we get to next year, we have a very important date coming up this year, which is your November 30 review. Given all of the headwinds that we are facing, given the uncertainty, I saw on the Bloomberg terminal this morning, we had arguably what we could call an escalation in the war in Russia, Russia's war in Ukraine today. What could we expect from your November 30 review? How is the Bank of Thailand looking at this, a very important decision?
I think you could expect a continuation of the approach that we've been doing. We've been slowly easing off the accelerator in terms of policy. In the big picture, inflation is a concern. I mean, central bank and the rate of inflation that's above target is something that we really follow closely. But what's more important is the trajectory going forward. And next year, we do forecast it to come down somewhere near our target. That's mostly reflecting the underlying nature of inflation that is more supply-driven, it's not demand-led, and it's also, not the second round effects of wage pass-through is not happening. So we do expect inflation to moderate, but we really want to make sure that the recovery does not add to the inflation pressure next year. So I think the smooth, gradual withdrawal of stimulus is something you could expect. We get a lot of questions about where's your terminal rate or neutral rate. All I would say, it is not what it is today. So you could expect not to be surprised. We don't aim to surprise the market, and I think in the November meeting, it should be a continuation of the approach we've been doing since the beginning of the year.
Not surprising the market, a boring central banker in the hot seat today. I want to remind our audience at this point that you can ask any questions that you might have to Khun Piti as well. Please use your phones. You're aware of the process that Malika walked you through. So please feel free to ask any questions on monetary policy to Khun Piti. Because this is the gentleman here who's very famously said that central banking is 90% communication and 10% action. So I want to ask you a very pointed question, Khun Piti, and there's no other way to ask this question really. Has the Fed acted responsibly in its communication of its monetary policy, especially when it comes to the second-rung impacts on emerging markets?
That's a good question, Janet. Actually, firstly, that quote that 90% of monetary policy is communication is not from me. I think it was Ben Bernanke or somebody else said it. But it's a fact. In these days, much of the work of monetary policy is done by the market in anticipation of what central banks are going to do in the future. And I guess the challenge of communicating, well, if you start at the end, the outcome, what ultimately is the policy action coming from? What moves policy? It's two things. It's either circumstance change, the economic conditions change, or the preference of the policymakers change. They may put more weight on output, more weight on inflation, those things. I think the key challenge of communication is to communicate that the preference of policymakers, which typically do not change, that is like the foundation of how policy is made. Because if the market understands the reaction function, how central banks will react to different conditions, they can anticipate what policy would be in the future given their forecast. The other bit, the actual change in the circumstance, that's a different issue, and that's more hard to forecast. I think if you're referring to the Fed evolution of their communication, you could say from the beginning of the year, I think in the beginning they were more in the mode of actually trying to guide the market quite directly in terms of a forward guidance that kind of borders on promising or being perceived to pursue a particular path. And I think the issue with that was that it's very difficult for the market when the policy path became different than what was telegraphed to differentiate between the two factors that I said. Is that change in policy because circumstances change, or is it actually the preference of the policymakers change? And I think that caused them some trouble. So the Fed quickly adjusted, and it became clear that they want to make sure that communicate their preference, which is they're gonna have to take care of inflation first and foremost, no matter what, and based on incoming data. So I think they've adjusted to circumstances quite well. As I said, everybody in the world was caught off guard by what happened this year. But to their credit, I think they've done a very good job in adjusting. And now people are forecasting the Fed pretty well, I would say. Yeah.
That's an interesting comment, because that change in preferences, either in trajectory or in policymaker preferences, creates noise. How will the Bank of Thailand ensure that there is no noise in your policy making? There is no noise that confuses the markets, both here as well as in the wider Asian region? That's
a great point, Janet. I mean, everybody here in this room, it's pretty clear there's a lot of uncertainty that the private sector and households have to deal with these days. The last thing that we want to do is to add to that by creating policy uncertainty. So as I said earlier, we do not aim and do not want to surprise the market, but if it comes to having to do something that was different than market expects because the circumstance changed, then we will actually do it. But in terms of trying to be as clear as possible about the preference of the policymakers, that bit, I think we can communicate, be transparent, try to describe how we got to where we are and how we're going to go in the future. I mean, all central banks try to do that. You see this long trend of increased transparency over the last decade. It's precisely to communicate the reaction function of central banks. So that's what the best we could do is make sure at least that the public does not misunderstand the preference or reaction function of central banks, and that the uncertainty comes only from the changing circumstances, the economic backdrop. That's the aim, at least. But I think that's the best we try to do that. Yeah.
I want to pull back a bit and go to my part of the world with the South Asia. But before that, PT, I want to give you a chance. Since you said you want to be transparent about your preferences, I would request you to articulate your preferences from the Bank of Thailand. Where does the Bank of Thailand's preferences lie right now? Right.
So in terms of, the Monetary Policy Committee makes the decision. The committee clearly looks at three. First and foremost, inflation is something that is the foundation for any sustainable growth. So that's the first thing that we really look at. The growth trajectory is also very important. Having sustained growth that's also, well distributed across the segments of society. And thirdly, financial stability is something that we also pay a lot of attention to because it matters for future growth. Not in of itself, but it's because it's an indicator of more medium-term prospects for growth. So those are the three things that always, is what the committee looks at. And the balance between those three objectives changed a little bit depending on the circumstance. Before, earlier this year, it was more about ensuring the recovery really takes hold. Clearly now, it's going to shift a bit more towards making sure inflation does not become embedded into the system, which right now it looks like it's going to be fine. In the background, we always look at financial stability in the medium-term horizon to make sure we're not causing trouble down the road. So in a nutshell, at this point in time, it's stability. It's what the Bank of Thailand wants to try to achieve with its policy. Yeah.
Surely stability is easier said than done.
Very, yes.
Because one channel, arguably, that has the most power to affect the stability is the FX rate. And very little really is in our control in a world where the dollar is so dominant. I come from South Asia. One of the countries I'm responsible for coverage is, of course, Sri Lanka. And while, of course, domestic policies play a part, we are seeing the effect, we are seeing the immediate effect of a strong dollar, which has led to really a heartbreaking debt crisis in the country. The Bank of Thailand has previously warned about a weak baht and the need to protect the local currency as well. Of course, in recent days, there's a smart rally in the baht. But where can we expect the currency to go from here? What are you monitoring very closely? Where could we expect the trajectory of the exchange rate to go?
You know, the first thing you learn in elementary macro is never forecast the exchange rate, because as a profession, we have not been able to even explain, you know, in hindsight, what drives the exchange rate in general. But so, yeah, I'm not going to forecast the path of the exchange rate, but I'm going to say that the exchange rate is a very important variable. It's one of the most important relative prices for the economy. Especially for emerging markets, the exchange rate can matter a lot if you have a lot of financing or debt that is denominated in dollars in foreign currency. If you have a lot of imports and a lot of pass-through from exchange rates, these are important channels, but it is quite heterogeneous across different countries. In the case of Thailand, the impact of exchange rate movements it has not been as pervasive as in, say, other emerging market economies, mainly because we're quite strong on the external front, as I mentioned earlier. We have very little foreign currency debt, even smaller in terms of short-term external debt. In terms, you know, foreign reserves are quite high. It's actually, I think, 12th highest in the world in absolute amounts, and if you scale it by GDP, it's about the 6th highest. The pass-through, the impact of exchange rate changes to CPI has been historically very low. I mean, very, very low. So in terms of our exposure to exchange rate from the financing side, from the trade side, it hasn't been a big factor. So in that sense, you know, we had let the exchange rate act more as a shock absorber in the past so far, up to now. But we would be concerned if the exchange rate becomes a shock amplifier. That's the threshold that we look at. You know, at some point, if the exchange rate moves way, you know, too much away from fundamentals, it may amplify things. That's when I think it becomes a policy concern. But so far, you know, it's been up and down. You had to have a steady hand and look through. But if you look at the baht to the dollar, it's weaker by 7% since the beginning of the year. If you look at on a trade-weighted basis, it's actually pretty much 1% higher, unchanged, basically. So, yeah, we have been quite resilient on this. And I think going forward, if I entertain a little bit, given our cycle is a bit later, so we're on the recovery path, as I mentioned, this is different than the rest of the world, where things are going to slow down quite a bit. You would think that that should be something that's supportive of investment in Thailand in general and the currency as well. So we actually think that there's a solid foundation for the country as well as for the currency. And
you spoke about investment coming into Thailand. Some numbers here. The country is net positive on equity inflows from abroad, about $5 billion this year. Thailand saw the highest weekly inflow into bonds since 2014 recently. So we're definitely seeing those inflows in. We're talking about a world where China is slowing and potentially trade flows might change a bit. Again, we're talking about potentially using the FX rate as a shock absorber. You mentioned that the exchange rate doesn't really become a problem unless it moves too much. What is your definition of too much?
It moves too much when it moves too much. This is the thing. It's, there's no fixed level that you can just pinpoint and say this is the threshold where things become out of too much, because it's all endogenous. It's all part of you know, the economic backdrop. So you have to always judge the movements of the currency relative to the ongoing economic backdrop. But when the exchange rate moves to the extent that it really causes some nonlinear behavior, for example, in the pass-through to inflation, that would be one example where it becomes a policy issue. Or if it moves to the extent that it creates some nonlinear effect in the financial market, really tightening of financial conditions, that would be a policy issue. But so far, it hasn't been the case in Thailand. For other emerging markets, it has been, because the dollar is it's actually a risk aversion metric, right? So when the dollar goes strong, it's usually really financial conditions tighten up globally, typically, and that's bad for some emerging markets, but not so much for Thailand so far.
Kunpiti, when I was canvassing my colleagues at Bloomberg for questions for the session, all of them told me one thing. They told me that the Bank of Thailand is a very astute observer of global trends. And therefore, I want you to ask this question that really is a big picture question. We have a war on in Europe right now. We have soaring energy and food prices. We are arguably moving from a unipolar world to a multipolar world. Is the structural nature of the world that we live in, the business climate that we live in, changing?
Very good question. I would say same, but different. So many of the changes that we see, they seem profound, including the geopolitical landscape. They're actually, I would view it as a continuation of something that's happened before the pandemic. Take geopolitics. We had Brexit. We had with President Trump, the Chinese-U.S. relationship was also already under pressure. With the globalization, actually world trade kind of flattened out already since the global financial crisis. So those trends were kind of beforehand. Technological progress that's happened beforehand is continued, and it's actually become accelerated by events. But those, in the big scheme of things, I think what we're seeing is a continuation or acceleration of previous trends. Those trends has been, in some sense, a tailwind for central banks in the past because they help to keep inflation low. Like globalization made production costs cheaper. Stable geopolitics also made the cost of doing business lower. But going forward, those trends may actually start becoming headwinds. So I think for central banks, the issue is that before we were in the world of trying to have insufficient demand, now it's going to be more a world of insufficient supply.
Insufficient supply.
The challenge will be try to manage in a world where supply is less responsive than it used to be, and it's becoming more of a constraint. In the pre-COVID era, the central banks were running against a zero low bound. That was the problem with stimulating demand. Now it's going to be like, we can't actually control supply. So it's going to be a different kind of challenge. Yeah.
A tricky job indeed, Kunpiti.
Yes.
Good luck. Speaking from one emerging market to the other, good luck with maintaining that balance to ensure that, sticking with the theme of the event, that the last man or woman is not left behind. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Janet.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage Chatsari Sopon Panit, President of Bangkok Bank, and Pakorn Peetathawatchai, President of the Stock Exchange of Thailand.
Nice to see you. Thank you. Hello, สวัสดีครับ
Kun Chatsuri, Kun Pakorn. Very interesting comments so far from the Honorable Finance Minister and from Kunpiti on policy. However, both of you and your organizations are the ones actually bringing in the money into the country, channeling the actual flows. As we spoke about, Thailand is sitting on a net positive equity inflows this year. There's a possibility that investment interest in the country will rise as the rest of the region slows. The nature of trade finance will change. I want to jump straight, Kun Pakorn, if I may. Do you expect these equity inflows to continue as we go through the year?
When you look at the fund flow, especially in the equity market into Thailand, it actually starts since the third or fourth quarter of last year, when we start to have the recovery of the export, which has been growing quite significantly. And for this year, when you look at the recovery in Thai market, you can see that actually the recovery are not that in all sectors yet. We call it the K-shaped recovery. The sector that has been recovered the most would be the export sector and technology sector and agriculture and food. Those are the sector that has been recovered very well so far. However, the other part of the industry that hasn't been recovered yet might be something like travel, logistics, like the restaurant and hospitality and healthcare. Those are things that actually hasn't been recovered fully yet. And when you look at this, even though we only have like half of our industry recovered, but on the listed company number, you will find that the earnings of the listed company already surpassed the total earning before the COVID. So it means that we start to have some recovery, and it has been quite good. However, it can be better. That's why I think that would be one of the reasons why the equity fund flow start to come back into Thailand.
Khun Chatri, earnings have surpassed COVID. On an economic front, the Bank of Thailand says that growth will reach pre-pandemic levels as early as this year, probably, or next year. And yet, we see strong headwinds to global growth. We see a slowing China, Thailand's largest trade partner. We see a strong exchange rate that's complicating policy. Could you help us understand how businesses such as yours are adjusting your stance in this changing environment?
Yes, I concur with what the Minister as well as the Assistant Governor Khun Pitti was talking, as well as Khun Pakorn. I think the Thai recovery has been on a steady basis last year and continue to do this year with a strong export sector, which has been performing quite reasonably well. At the same time, now that the tourism is also picking up, estimate this year to be about 10 million tourists, although a quarter of the total that we used to achieve at 40 million, but it's a significant portion that will help also drive the domestic economy. Next year, I think many of the infrastructure projects that have been awarded and would also be moving forward. So we will see more of the capital expenditure taking this place next year. So it's moving forward on the orderly basis, which also will trickle down and will benefit to the smaller customers and individuals eventually. At the same time, you can also see that many of our corporates are also quite strong, and also they expand into the region through the regionalization, and some of them on the global basis. I think those also look for new opportunities as well as new markets in the region.
Where do you see your new markets for Bangkok Bank?
I think Asia certainly will be a very important part over the next 10, 20 years to come. I think China obviously will lead the whole region for this coming century, and eventually will also be India, and of course I hope ASEAN, especially with a strong Indonesia base, which probably will help lead the ASEAN economy moving forward. So the regionalization will be quite an important place. Vietnam is also coming quite strong, so is the Philippines.
Sticking with the theme of regionalization, playing a bit of an antagonist here. Yes, Thailand is taking care of the last man and woman, is keeping interest rates steady. You're taking care of your customers in a situation where global interest rates are rising much faster. But that also means that the Thai savers have limited options for investing their money. Khun Pakorn, if I may ask you this question, is the Stock Exchange of Thailand bringing in new products where the domestic savers can invest their money in for healthy returns? Where would you advise the Thai people to put their money?
That's a very good question. With this kind of climate, you will notice that a lot of investment has a lot of correlation. Unlike previously when pre-COVID, when you look at the return on investing in various products, various markets, you can still get a lot of like diversification factors. But at the moment, I would say the correlation has become very much like one. This is why I would say that in order to invest in any investment opportunity nowadays, we need a story. What would be a story that you believe? What would be a story that you think would give you a sustainable growth, sustainable profit? For example, for Thailand, when we are trying to do the roadshow and we show our listed company performance to the global investors, we are coming with a theme. For example, nowadays you might see that many listed companies in Thailand actually don't just invest in Thailand. They become a regional company, they become a global company. We call that global exposure company, or we call it CLMV exposure company. And if you believe that the economy in those countries or in those regions gonna grow, this is how you should invest, because it's on the Thai company who are doing business over there. Or on the other hand, another example, what is the strength of Thailand? I would call that tourist industry, restaurant industry, hotel, and healthcare. So we come up with a well-being index and have a list of a company that are doing those kind of business and show it to the investor and saying that if you believe that Thailand are good at this, this is the way that you should invest in Thailand. Or sustainability index, because Thai companies have been doing so well in these ESG practices and all the sustainability concept. We come up with the THSI, Thailand Sustainability Index, and also get a lot of index providers to come in and evaluate us on the basis of the sustainability. So those are the stories that we try to sell to our investors, not just that you need to diversify across product, diversify across the region, but also it got to be story.
And Kun Chatsiri, how does Bangkok Bank see Thailand's story, and how do you see the story of your own business?
Of course, Thailand is a very important market. It's our home base, and we see many good opportunities that will be shown over the next 5 to 10 years. I think to expand on Kun Pakorn's point, the SEC and the Bank of Thailand also have been trying to use, as you point out, about the savings in Thailand. How can we also be providing funding for the region with different capital market instruments and others? And so standardization and harmonization of many of the regulations across the region, so that different countries can also use, companies can use Thailand to raise the funding. For us, apart from Thailand, we see that the region will be a very important part. Our presence with some 30 offices in some 30 economies, mostly in Asia, and with London and New York. Then we also have another 270 branches in Indonesia through Permata Bank, which we make an acquisition in 2020. So we believe that the region will have a very strong growth potential. Vietnam also has a very strong growth rate, as you see that the first 9 months of this year grew over 8.8%, and the export sector already about $280 billion, which exhibit a very strong performance. The Philippines also upcoming. So I think the regionalization will be quite an important part, and we also supplement the security for the localization as well as moving the region forward.
Are you looking at any more acquisitions to push this regionalization strategy?
We have, for the time being, I think, Permata is a big baby, and also our presence in the region is also quite a good coverage. It will be, I think we can expand within what we have currently.
A question to both of you, taking off again on what you spoke about, regulations needed to expand this regionalization push. Kun Pakorn, what kind of regulations would you like to see to encourage more regionalization when it comes to offering more products from the Stock Exchange of Thailand to the entire ASEAN region?
At the moment, we have been working with many ASEAN exchanges and also the big Asia exchange like China and Japan to work on the cross-listing of the product. For example, ETF, the exchange traded fund, and a product called derivative warrant. No, sorry, the depository receipt. In order to do the dual listing of that, we can get around the issue that each country doesn't want to do the fundraising in other country. In this case, each country can still do the fundraising in the home market. However, that security can be bought and construct as a new instrument called depository receipt or the ETF and sell it in foreign market. In that way, investor locally can start to invest outside of the country. In Thailand nowadays, there is one product. It's an ETF, the Exchange Traded Fund, of the Vietnam top 30 company listed in Ho Chi Minh Stock Exchange. Don't you believe that the trading value, half of that trading value in Ho Chi Minh Stock Exchange come from Thailand? So you can see that nowadays you don't have to do the cross-listing, but you can do the listing in the parent market and do the cross-listing to get the funding or liquidity from outside of the market. This is one of the things that we are trying to work with other ASEAN exchange and many other Asia exchange also to create this type of product. For example, you are a foreign investor investing in Thailand, and you are saying that, hey, I don't want to do the due diligence in Vietnam, Myanmar, or Laos or Cambodia. But if we have this product that getting all this stock or share from other country, at least in Thailand, they just do due diligence in Thailand, and they can invest in the region. Those are the type of the thing that we are working on.
Kunchatsuri, there's an interesting experiment around in the region with several Asian central banks to push their own digital currencies. Do you think interoperability of digital currencies with Asia coming together, getting their payment systems to talk to each other, create this pool of liquidity in the region, would that be something that could really push the Asian market, Thailand being part of it, into, let's say, direct competition with Wall Street?
I think the trend is moving in that direction, and my understanding is the Bank of Thailand also has been working with the Hong Kong monetary authorities as well as the PBOC for the certain pilot on the digital currency, especially cross-border payment. I think so probably some more initiatives will be moving along that basis in order to create eventually the digital currency acceptance that would be on the official basis. And I think that would be a very important movement into the future. On the commercial side, the Thai Bankers Association and Bank of Thailand also have been working with other ASEAN banking associations in Singapore, in Indonesia, in Vietnam, Malaysia, the Philippines, for example, and even Cambodia on the QR code so that there will be the interoperability, use the same standardization, make it easier for money payment on the digital basis on the QR code. And I think that also will be expanding further. So by using certain standardization, not dissimilar to what Pakorn is talking about, the standardization of the security registration, both on the debt and equity, so that make it easier for movement as well as a fundraising. This is on the payment side. This is also moving along that basis. On the trade side, for example, we are also using the R3 on the contour to do the payment system for the trade among some of our network between Bangkok and Jakarta and Vietnam, for instance. And this also would help reduce the operating costs and increase the efficiency.
So you would, question to both of you. So you would say that there is room for ASEAN to stick with their own currencies, their own local currencies, and yet create a system where there's absolute frictionless flow of the currencies in a way that you no longer need the dollar?
I probably will not go that far, but I think each country probably will have its own currency so that has certain level of abilities to pursue their own monetary exchange and fiscal policies, but yet also regional cooperation to provide support and stability Just like in the 1997 crisis, I think Thailand and some other ASEAN countries got also strong support from China and Japan, for example, that have also stabilized the region. So I think probably similar to that type of scheme, that would also give more cushion and resiliency for the region.
Pakorn, what are you most excited about when it comes to all of the changes that you're seeing? Of course, Bangkok Bank has got great praises when it comes to digitalization, pushing technology. What makes you most excited in terms of the coming months, the coming years for the stock exchange and also for Thailand's economy overall?
I think we are in the time of very interesting time. There are so many things that change behavior of the investor, the behavior of the fundraiser, the technology, and the way that we have to become more like partnership than competitor. I think this is the era where maybe the new thinking would be so important. For example, when you look at the fundraising nowadays, you can go to the traditional market, raising fund from the bond market, go to Kun Chachri Bank, go to the equity market. You can do all those very conveniently, but we still have new instruments, investment token, utility token, which at the moment are at the beginning of the stage of development. So we have so many things that we can look into. Even at the stock exchange, now we have the SET market as a main market for the medium-sized and big-sized company to do the fundraising. We have the MAI for the medium-sized company. And now we have a live exchange for the startup and SME. So you can see that nowadays we have so many ways that you can do these activities. On the investment, 10 years ago, when you talk about the investment in Thailand, most of the investment come from calling the marketing and let them do all the keying in the order. Nowadays, 90% of the transaction of the retail investor are online, are mobile. So you can see these are the behavior change, and technology actually come and help a lot of these kind of progress.
I think similar to digital currency, under Kun Pakorn's leadership, we are initiating the digital platform for the security settlement, payment settlement.
Systems.
Yeah.
So that's why I mentioned that we are in the period of very interesting thing. So there are so many things. I didn't even touch up on the digital asset exchange. I didn't even touch up on the way that the exchange start to become more like capital market infrastructure. So there are so many things that we work into, but we got to prioritize and do something that most meaningful first.
So what is your priority?
At the moment, when you look at Thai capital market, there are two things that we have been a bit behind other developed exchanges. First, we don't have that many fundraising from foreign company. That is the first thing. And the second thing is that we don't have the access for the startup and SME to do the fundraising to the capital market. That's why you can see that we initiate many projects that involving that how can we get Thai investor to be able to invest abroad, and also foreign investor to be foreign company to be able to do the fundraising in Thailand. Nowadays they can do 5 ways. They can raise the money through the holding company structure, the primary listing, secondary listing, the REIT, and infrastructure trust. Those are the 5 things that now we start to allow the foreign company to be able to raise fund more conveniently in Thailand. And also we come up with a live platform and live exchange so that we start from grooming the startup to understand capital market. They give them the share service on those, like the way to manage their accounting, HR, IT, legal more easily. Get them to do the input of data into the system so that it can be done the due diligence easily, and then fundraising to have a meeting place for the people who want to invest in the startup and the startup company to meet. Those are the 2 things that to me is a very high priority, and we are trying to promote that nowadays.
It's interesting you mentioned startups, Pakorn, because globally right now, the tech sector is undergoing severe headwinds as the global monetary cycle tightens. In the US, in my own country, India, we can see all of the startups are facing a lot of pressure when they come to refinance their money. I want to flip the question. I asked you, what are you most excited about? I want to ask Khun Chatsiri, what are you most worried about?
I think the growth potential of the region will still be quite important, and that will lead to many opportunities. The change in lifestyle will lead to different type of consumption requirements. We also lead to many type of manufacturing, whether in terms of food, say electric vehicle, biotechnology, healthcare, energy, and infrastructure. Since that will be the area will have many sophistication developed. Of course, through this, I think the geopolitics will be quite an important aspect in this. Probably, as you asked the question in the earlier session, I think the New World Order probably eventually will be drawn, even though it might be bipolar or multipolar, but eventually there will be some level of connectivity. But at the same time, the level of regionalization and localization will be important to ensure that not just in time, but more like just in case, right? So that I think there will be a balance of the two. But the domestic economy of the ASEAN will still be an important, and Asia will still be an important part. So I hope that we keep this region to be neutral and independent, and be able to serve the requirements of the rest of the world together with the domestic requirements of ASEAN.
Khun Chatsiri, there's absolutely no doubt that Asia is the bright spot. It's going to continue to be a growth engine for the world. And within that, ASEAN will play a very important role. But I want to go back to the point that you raised. It was something that Khun PT also mentioned about the changing consumption patterns, where arguably younger generations would want to eat more proteins as living standards rise in the world. They want to buy electric vehicles. And again, as I mentioned to Khun PT as well, we have a war in one part of the world. We arguably had an escalation this morning. We have China increasingly challenging the unipolarity of the US. Is the world we're living in changing? First, that question to you, Khun Chatsiri.
I think the world is changing, right? And the last 40 years, globalization has been the theme. And go for the efficiency. But I think as we move on, as we have evidence from the COVID, so efficiency alone is not enough, but sometimes some level of security is also quite important, because disruption could take place from shutting down of certain factories, or then difficulties in terms of the logistics movement. So I think there will be a balance between globalization efficiency as well as the security and local level of practice. And I think that probably will also create more opportunity on the domestic side of each of the respective countries.
And Khun Pakorn, how should businesses think? How should young business people, as well as entrenched businesses, prepare for this change that thinkers, including Khun Chatsiri, are warning us about?
Very good question. To me, at the moment, the things that I can give advice to them is that nowadays you have a lot of opportunity and you have a lot of channel to raise the funding. If your idea is good, the thing is that how can you get a consistent funding? How do you prove that you have been achieving something so that you can meet the requirement of the person who is investing in your business? I think the kids nowadays, they have many good ideas, but the thing that they need to understand also that they need to make the investor understand what they are doing. What is the achievable? What would be the milestone? How would they share the benefit? And what would be the end game? I think those are so important, not just for the new kid, but for all the people who are doing business. But nowadays, to my opinion, they seem to forget that you need to deliver something, not just something that you think is important by yourself.
How do we have a meeting of minds, especially in a region like Asia, where we are seeing generational change, where we are seeing startups led by very young people, where we are arguably going to get into a period where we are going to see massive generational wealth change, where the younger generation will take over inheritances from first-generation businesses. Kunchatsiri, if I may ask you to take this question first. How are banks like Bangkok Bank positioning for this generational change in a region that's going to be at the forefront of this push?
Family business is something that we value a great deal, and the change from one generation to another can lead to both opportunities and challenges. So how can we best provide support to them? Normally, the second and third generation, they have much better education, also with much better perspective in outlook and so forth. At the same time, also capital from what their parents or their grandparents have built, so they can try on different things, including what you mentioned of the startup. But of course, the challenge is on the management and the scalability, which I think the older generation have. So how to combine the two together in coordination. At the same time, when you go through across different countries, also different levels of development across the economies, and in certain areas, like in pharmaceutical and healthcare, India is also very strong as a leader in that area. In technology management and management, India also very strong. In China, on the consumption and technological advancement, Indonesia also a lot of opportunities in terms of the natural resources, and they have very fertile ground, also plenty of water, so very good in agriculture. Vietnam, very hardworking people, and so forth. So these are different combinations of how do we make sure. So I think the cross-border investments and also collaboration together will increase the nature of the greater understanding, and hopefully that would also provide greater stability in the medium term as well as the business opportunities.
The message coming across is very clear from these sessions that there are so many strengths in this region. We've got to play to the strengths that each of these countries have, with businesses like yours facilitating and guiding the changes that are going to come. Khun Pakorn, final word to you. I asked you previously what excites you the most as well, but I want to drill down into this question. If you look at the regionalization of ASEAN, where do you think you would place your largest investments?
You asked me a very difficult question to answer. In my opinion, like I told you before, diversification is very important. And the story of the investment, to me, is also very important. For example, we just came back from the roadshow for the ASEAN Exchange in New York City. Interestingly, each of the exchange tell the story totally different. For Thailand, we are talking about sustainability. We are talking about the industry that are very strong and has been improving using digital technology. Singapore talk about the banking sector, financial sector, talking about the port, the reed on the port. Malaysia talking about the plantation, talking about the petrochemical business. Indonesia talking about startup. Philippines talking about their new business in their country. I think this is the fascinating story. It doesn't have to be one country that you only focus on, but it's more like in the area. For example, in ASEAN, I think there are so many compelling stories that you can talk to the investor that they don't know yet. For example, when we went there and we talk about the story in each of our country, the investor was like intriguing because wow, we never heard about this, and this is so interesting that you are so complementary to each other. So this is one of the story that I would say, diversification and believe in story.
Diversification in a changing world, lots of opportunities, but as Khun Chaturi also said, some challenges as well. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for your engaging conversation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage Harold Link, Chairman of BGRIM and President of BGRIM Power Public Company Limited.
So nice to be here again and to have APEC again in Thailand. Made so many friends last time. Most of us here in the room are connected to business or have our own businesses or work in a business company. And then somehow, unfortunately, people think that we are in it for the money. You would never say to a nurse, you are in it for the money. The nurse likes to look after people. So I think businesses, we do the business because we can do something good for society. So everybody has a different contribution to society in that. And this is what BGRIM has been doing from the very beginning. So we always want to do things where we think these are valuable for society. Now, with some of it, we can create some cash flow and some money. With others, it's just spending money on making things happen, which is good for society. And some others, like our support for the Royal Bangkok Symphony Orchestra, which I chair, we have 5% income of our cost. So it's all a mix. And I think this is what life is all about. And this is what we all, I think, are doing. Unfortunately, the business schools, they say that companies are there to make profit. But this is like saying an architect wants to be an architect because he wants to make a high salary, which is not true. So we have been doing a number of things, and we hear today a lot about all these acronyms like ESG or BCG, or used to be ISO or CSR. But these are all good endeavors to make the society a better place and let companies work in a way that helps society and also helps the ecosystem. Now, what I like to end with is with the ecosystem. Now, since we often live in high-rise buildings with our office, and then we go home in a big city, maybe we don't have so much opportunity to connect to wildlife. Without wildlife, the country is not worth living in. Wildlife sustains us. So that's why so many countries have national parks. If you're interested in what happens if you take the top of the food chain away and then reintroduce it again, please look at YouTube and Wolves and Yellowstone Park. There you will be quite surprised how wonderful the reintroduction of these predators in Yellowstone Park were and how they changed the landscape to the better. Now, we have the top of the food chain is a tiger. So the tigers are nearly extinct, but there are about 5 or so countries that still have enough tigers, and we have to save them. Because as long as we save the tigers, the ecosystem is still in order. And then the world can, at least in our region here, can go on. So unfortunately now, BGRIM is the only company that supports saving the tigers. But fortunately, the Thai government does a lot to do that. And if it's possible, I would like you to participate in saving the tigers, or at least send your heart out to them. Because life is a lot about love and about friendship and about supporting our nature. So please join us in supporting tigers, save the tigers. Thank you.
It's time to bring harmony back to the forest. Please join us. Save the tigers.
President, Bangkok Dusit Medical Services, PCL, for a conversation with Bloomberg's K-Won Ha.
Welcome. The COVID-19 pandemic really showed us all the need for resilient and more innovative healthcare systems around the world. And nowhere is that need more pressing than here in Asia, as we've seen. And it's here in Southeast Asia that, every year, more than 70% of mortalities, of deaths, are because of chronic diseases that can be managed, like diabetes, like hypertension, and heart disease. Yet here in this region, we're seeing that healthcare spending as a percentage of GDP is actually the lowest among all the World Health Organization regions. So here to talk about how we can change that and the role of private healthcare systems is Dr. Pakorn Osut. Thank you so much for your time. I want to start because you obviously are president. You run the biggest private healthcare chain system here in Thailand, and you were drafted by the government to help with the pandemic response. What did we learn from that? What did you learn about the role of private healthcare systems during the pandemic?
I must say it's not just us, the private healthcare. When we have to deal with COVID, under the government policy, the healthcare policy, the guideline, we follow. We do our tasks as a private hospital network. So it's not just us, the whole Thailand working together. And also I have to stress on this, it's not just healthcare organization that can do to assist Thai people to get through the COVID era. Let's say, for example, we receive the vaccine from the government, but the way to distribute across Thailand, we're working with the government, we're working with the retail organization where they provide us the location. It's easy access location for Thai people to get the vaccine. So we do our tasks. Other Thai people, they do their own tasks, whatever they can to help Thailand get through this.
So you really need cooperation from every single part of the healthcare system, public and private as well, and logistics, which is also an important aspect of that. Now, during the pandemic, as we saw around the world, it was really difficult for hospitals to manage manage and balance treating acute cases, COVID patients that were coming in, as well as balance that with more chronic diseases and patients who needed longer-term care. But you guys found a really innovative way with doubling down on telemedicine and even in-house services to bridge that gap. Tell us about that.
Yes, this is not just we have to take care of the COVID patient. We also have the existing patient, Thai and expat, and also the medical tourism who used to come to get the treatment and care from us. So how we continue during this era, So we have to find other ways to connect it with them to make sure they get the right treatment, the consultation, and also the medicines, or even taking the blood tests. Digital healthcare or teleconsultation in Thailand is actually started before COVID. But at the time, not just the patient, doctors also not into it because they so get used to the way, the convenient way, the traditional way that they do. But once the COVID hits, so we haven't started from zero. We developed some system, and the other thing is other hospital and also governments have innovative way on teleconsultation. So we just get started and get a kick-off on that, talking to patient through easy way. You do not have to have a software. We can talk to the social media system, lines on whatever that we have at the time, and gradually develop the stable system to make sure everything is safe, the quality, safety for the patient. So we're talking with Thai patients, deliver medicines.
To their homes.
Yes,
right?
And also, if it need be, we also have to taking the blood tests or some other investigations. And what I mentioned, it's not just Thai people or expats who live in Thailand. We also have the existing medical tourism who usually come to us regularly. What can we do? We either talk to them on phone or other way as a teleconsultation. And we also deliver the medicine if possible, if the regulation of their country allow.
It sounded like the pandemic really got people used to the idea of telemedicine, and now you're really able to really leverage off of that.
Yes.
I know we've got a poll, and we want to get you involved as well. We're seeing some photos here from the pandemic here. I think they're going to pull up the polling in a little bit.
The previous pictures, that must be the vaccination center across Thailand that government, private healthcare, and other local organizations working together.
Fantastic. We're going to pull up the poll in a little bit. Before we get there, it was funny because off of our conversation of having, therapists and having people, for example, healthcare assistants, actually go out and take patients' blood pressure, for example. I actually injured my foot, and I was really surprised that here in Thailand, I actually could get a therapist, physiotherapist, to actually come out to my hotel room to help me, try to recover from that. So, I think it's amazing what we can do now with those kinds of services. And it sounds like you're also doing that on a regular basis as well.
Yes. When you say it as a digital healthcare, things that do not have to rely on the digitalized, but the spreading or accessible of the healthcare can be beyond the hospital. That's the key.
Really meeting patients wherever they need those services.
Yes.
All right, we've got our poll up, so please pull out your phones and participate. The question is, to avoid a healthcare crisis, we must strengthen infrastructure, recruit more medical professionals, encourage private investments, or enact supportive government policies. What do you think? Let us know what you think. It's still going on there. But it looks like there's pretty overwhelming thought there that we really need to enact supportive government policies. What do you think?
In Thailand, the regulations and government policy may not reach the stage or up to date with the digital healthcare or healthcare anywhere, as I say. The regulations still limited to hospital, healthcare provider, and so on. But if we want to distribute the healthcare beyond the location, the building, all of these regulation has to be adjusted. And also the digital systems, electronic payments, and so on, all this will support the healthcare.
Great. Are you getting the sense that government is being more open to supportive policies that would help systems like yours, private hospital systems like yours? Are we seeing that post-pandemic? Are you engaging and having those conversations now?
I think they do, because when I mentioned that we developed the digital consultation before COVID, at the time it hasn't been supported by government just yet. But during the COVID time, they realized that this is a new way for people to get access to healthcare. So the regulation has changed that we can do that without, practicing illegally.
That's great. Well, please continue, and interesting results there. One of the things I wanted to ask you about with telemedicine, because off of our conversation at the Bloomberg CEO Forum that we recently held last week in Bali, we also had a session on healthcare, and telemedicine was also very important. That we talked to the CEO of Click Doctor, who has a digital platform system where it's mostly digital, and they're really reaching people out in the provinces, people out in, who normally in rural areas who we normally wouldn't get access to. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about how telemedicine can really help to bridge that gap and to really bring more equitable healthcare system to those who normally might not get access because there's such a shortage of doctors.
Telemedicine will not replace the traditional way of healthcare, because when you get the chronic disease or a complex disease, you still have to come to see the doctors in person to get the correct treatments, x-rays, and so on in the hospital. But for the preventative or simple disease, some of the disease that can be taken care as through the tele system, that will help on the limitation of the resource, as we all know that number of doctors, especially the specialists in each area, is still limited. Not just in Thailand, but across the world. Some region that has limited of even doctors, not specialists. So the tele system will assist not just in Thailand, but globally.
Great. Of course, Thailand is well known for medical tourism. You do have some competition around the region with Korea, and as well as Singapore, also known for that. But how are you guys leveraging, medical tourism post-pandemic? What is the value add that you're putting out there?
We see the coming back of the medical tourism already in the past couple of months as a private hospital. But more importantly, what we see ourselves as Thailand is we have environment, we have culture, Thai culture, Thai personality, good location. So we have a high opportunity on this. As I said, not just the treatment in the hospital as a private hospital itself, but to expand the healthcare, medical tourism on wellness and also on preventive, that we can combine the healthcare with tourism, with hotel and other service, including food, to support the wellness tourism.
So for example, you could stay at, the Waldorf Astoria and then be offered a package where, tell us about that. What kind of package would you be offered? Weight control, skin, beauties. So especially in a nice environment, you want good things onto you. You want to be healthy mentally, physically. You want to go back after your trip to be more healthier and also feeling good to yourself. So this can be add on to our well-known service as a tourism. That's great. I was going to ask you, what do you think off of the lessons learned from COVID, what can private healthcare systems, what can they do to help prepare for the next pandemic?
We know ourselves that we have to be adapt and flexible, especially the way that we do in terms of healthcare. We have to go beyond the hospital. But the most important thing, and we think that it's a good thing for not just Thai people, but globally, that every one of us realize that we have to take good care of our health. Some say all the time that we can hear from the news that if you have diabetes, if you overweight, you will have a high risk of having a complication after COVID or other disease that you catch. So if people realize that they have to stay healthy, they will have to take great care of themselves. So whatever happens, we can face that.
And hopefully by having better health before a pandemic,
yes,
you might get better results,
definitely.
right? And they'll be more primed to actually seek vaccines in some of those
yes.
hospital systems as well. We just have a few minutes left. I wanted to ask you, what do you think is, we've obviously talked about the need for government policies, better government policies. What do you think is another big challenge that healthcare systems here in Southeast Asia face, and how can government as well as private industry work together to overcome that?
If we're not waiting to taking care of health when you already sick or ill, but we move on to focus on preventative, taking great care, either do the check-up, genetic tests, or food, or whatever we can do, that will help us to cut down on the healthcare budget.
That's fantastic. Dr. Bormaporn Prasathawachai, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage Parut Benpayap, Project Director, MQDC Metaverse.
It is certainly my distinct pleasure and honor to represent MQDC at Bloomberg Business Summit. I shall admit at first, with this topic in mind, Metaverse as the new digital transformation and vision of MQDC, I cannot do justice within 5 minutes to talk about the breadth and depth of the Metaverse and its possibility. But today, I understand that we are here to discuss and have the fruitful dialogue about the possible future, the great potential that we could revive our economy. I would like to invite everyone to think about the Metaverse as one of the key drivers to redefine the economy and the way that we could reimagine the new forms of social interactions. Start with a fun fact first on how Metaverse is relevant to us more and more. Last year, Bloomberg cataloged more than thousands of stories containing the word Metaverse. In comparison to the previous decade, just only 7 stories. Certainly, there is the growing interest about the Metaverse. There is the growing, fruitful dialogue about the Metaverse, not just only as the science fiction, but the possible way that we could create use cases across the industry. Several analyses, several experts provide us with the trajectory of the sizing, the value of the Metaverse. Some even say that the size of the virtual economy could be larger, potentially, than the size of the economy in the physical world. But I think that we shall not think of the virtual economy and the economy in this physical world as the competitor. We shall think about the correct synergy, not to decouple between the two. I would say for MQDC, together with our strategic partner at Translucia, we believe in the way that we shall bridge this virtual economy with our economy in the physical world. Both supposed to be real economy, by the way. Further, me and my team, we have a start collaboration with Accenture since the beginning of this year. From the very beginning, they provide us with this analysis, the way that we shall build the ecosystem and the magnitude of the sizing of the value. Not just only one company can do this. We need multiple support, multiple participation at various layers, from the infrastructure to the device, to the software, payment system, as well as the content creation and experience design. Of course, oops, oh, there's the snow coming a little bit. Most of people say that now we are in the economic winter. Of course, when we look at the short term, there is volatility, there is fluctuation on hourly, on daily, on weekly basis. But I think that it should not derail our greater initiative. It should not derail us to think about and planning for the moonshot projects. Otherwise, us, the humankind, would not be able to fly to the moon or traveling the space. If we decide to stop everything only because we failed to launch the first rocket. So I would say we shall not be passive, but to be proactive, because it's so crucial the way that we participate in this future, to give more fundamental, robust growth potential together with the Metaverse. Nowadays, people tend to think or perceive Metaverse as gaming, entertainment. But I would say I learned from various experts that there will be multiple emerging use cases across industry that probably we haven't think about nowadays. I'm talking about banking industry, I'm talking about transportation, healthcare, and so, including the real estate, of course. With those snapshots of analysis in mind, the next session, let me shed light on what we aim to achieve at MQDC and why Metaverse for us. Most of the people tend to recognize MQDC as the real estate company. But I don't think we do just that. Each and every project we develop, we adhere to the principle for all well-being. Not just only to improve the quality of life of the people, but to make sure that we're taking the good care of the world, the planet Earth, as well as the world of biodiversity. With those initiatives in mind, we believe that Metaverse could be the key driver for us to extend our purpose-driven initiative at the global scale, to take what we have throughout the physical projects and bridge the physical and virtual experiences for all well-being. I think it's going to take half a day for me to talk about the project that we have in our portfolio and our collaboration with our strategic partners. But to give you a glimpse of the relationship with our existing business and the future possibility of our Metaverse initiative, let me talk briefly about our Forestiers project, the latest flagship theme projects that we have. Each and every project, we try to come up with the future living solutions. We work with our multiple partners, and I'm super mesmerized when the founder of MQDC mentioned to me that this type of project supposed to be the innovation playground for us to collaborate with the top experts, top researchers, as well as the top designers, not only in Thailand, but at the global scale. Forward, provide a future living solution, and create the sustainable development. We aim to be part of the larger collective efforts to address the global pain points, such as climate change, such as biodiversity collapse, as well as to address the local pain points, which is various from one location to the other, to make sure that we could provide well-being to our communities, mentally, physically. Just a tiny glimpse that I would like to show you example. To address the climate change, we build and grow the actual forest at the forestiers. We work with multiple researchers to come up with this concept. Not just only the greenery space, not just the garden, but the actual forest, to make sure that people in our community could have well-being mentally, physically. There is several innovations, big and small, in each and every detail that we put into the Forestier project. Let's talk about that later. But I shall say that we not only aim to build condominiums, house, retail, commercial space, but we aim to deliver the best experience to our customers in every detail. With the state-of-the-art Web3 technologies, with the best deployment of artificial intelligence, extended reality, blockchain, and so on. I believe what we aim is to transform our physical project in Bangkok, in Thailand, into virtual attractions for the global community. Several things that we could achieve. But if I could give you 3 snapshots, we already got BIM model for the design of our physical project. I think there is a great opportunity for us to create more values to our customers, turning those BIM model into the digital twin with the IoT integration to provide the smart living solutions to our residents. Secondly, we have multiple retail and commercial partners, tenants in our physical projects, and we aim to expand that at the global stage. Those digital twin concepts, we could also provide the virtual or even physical flagship store experiences for our partners. Crucial, more than that, I would say with this great capability, we can create the additional set of virtual attractions, virtual homes, and so on, with the fantastic extraordinary design, with no constraint of the law of physics, of the law of gravity. Not just only for the Forestier project, we have multiple projects in the physical world, and we aim that it could turn into the Metaverse experience for the global communities to appreciate. With these big ideas and big plan in mind, we cannot do it alone. That's why we set out the strategic partnership with Translucia, the infinite universe of interconnected Metaverse. MQDC, we will be the first Metaverse developer on Translucia. Who said that Metaverse tech-related is not labor-intensive? I don't think so. We need the right ecosystem to build this Metaverse. That's why we have this ecosystem of partners across the world, from the content creation, 3D asset development, Metaverse technology stack development. And so I would end my session here with this greater possibility. It shall not be just only the attempt of one or two companies or a group of companies. We totally need the collective efforts from multiple stakeholders, both in the private sector and public sector, to build the new economy to better our society and the world. Thank you so much.
Please welcome to the stage Narisa Chauvidul-Aw, CEO and founder of KogoPay, and Pakorn Warangun, former Minister of Tourism and Sports of Thailand and chairperson of Toshiba Thailand Company Limited and chairperson of Kasikorn Bank, for a conversation with Bloomberg's Malika Kapoor.
Good afternoon. I'm delighted to be up on stage with two incredible women, and I'm going to get right to it. We know that during the pandemic, globally, millions of women left the workforce. I'm going to start with you. Are they coming back now?
Actually, in Thailand, they are coming back. But the problem is not about coming back or not. The problem is that at the moment, we are lacking of the manpower, the shortage of manpower.
The shortage of labor overall.
In many levels. The problem might have come from the changes after crisis. To myself, I believe that there might be 4 types of people. After COVID, what has happened? The first type will be the people who, after they receive the package of layoff, they go back to their hometown.
Yep.
They discover that actually there is something that they can do. They discover their new skill and they become entrepreneur.
Yep.
They become smart farmers, and now they don't want to return. The second group will be the people that maybe they learn from the crisis that the world has changed and their mind has changed. And so therefore, the view of the world has changed. They don't want to stick to anything. They want freedom. They don't know what will happen tomorrow. And so therefore, some people may say this is like gig economy. Meaning that I don't belong to anywhere. I want to do this maybe for 3 months and then another things for another 3 months. So
keep trying different experiences.
Right.
Yeah.
And the third one will be the people who I would say that, okay, I want to return, but please understand my new lifestyle. I get used to hybrid. I get used to partially work at home. I want to send my children to school, and so therefore, please rearrange the way of work. But last but not least, will be maybe the people like myself. I die to return. I want to be with people.
Yes.
And so therefore, with this kind of combination, some return, some discover new life. And so what we have to do, maybe later on I can tell you what we are doing in Thailand about this.
That's a really good point. And the third person, the third category of people you talked about, they're coming back, but their view of the world has changed. So Narisa, I want to ask you, when you find women are coming back into the workforce, it seems that they're coming back with a different set of asks, right? They want different things from their companies now. What do they want?
We want to have more flexible hours, and we want to get more support, and we need to train them more. And like for example, myself, I can do what I'm doing now. I can travel and I can expand into other countries because of my husband also can work from home, and I can't do it without support from my family and also. The policies that the company has provided us, my husband. And also we have to train a lot of women as well. Like some industry that start recovering, like tourism, aviation, a lot more women working there. And we have to support them in terms of give them flexibility so they can come back with more training and also flexible for them to take care of their families and also come back to work.
So flexibility is key. Karan, let me ask you this. If companies don't then offer flexibility, they're at the risk of losing talent, right? I read this amazing report by Lean In, the organization, and they talked about the great backup. And I hadn't heard of this. I've heard of the great resignation, but I hadn't heard of the great backup. And they're saying that women are leaving companies at very senior positions at the fastest rate ever. They're not leaving to quit work. They're leaving to go to a different company, a company that's offering them flexibility and other privileges that they want. What are you seeing?
Well, that's the key. So how to understand your people.
Right.
But then at the same time, my personal point of view is that it doesn't mean that this is a new normal. I believe that people will constantly change. Maybe this is up to the stage where they want their life to be, but then in the next 1 or 2 years, things will change again. But we need to understand, we need to communicate to them. And for us at the bank, meaning that we have to provide 2 or 3 ways of working to accommodate maybe type 3 people or type 4 people, because some people, they just want to return. But then at the same time, the type that the people who would like to understand that they want to have more time for their children, they want to have more time to travel, to discover themselves. So we need to create a new environment with the understanding and definitely with the communication. But then I would like to add on that it's not only staff, because on another hand, I'm also heading the electrical appliance business. We also have to take care of our dealers around the country. So staff is also one thing that we have to take care. Another thing is our people, I would say the third stakeholders, our dealers. We don't want the young generation, the second generation or the third generation to quit, because they start to feel that there is no insecurity any longer. They have money already. They want to sell business.
Yeah.
And that is something that what we have been doing is to have a new training. But the training that we have given to them is not technology training. Of course, we have to tell them how to do online more and that kind of thing. But most important is the spirit training.
Yeah.
The heart.
Yes.
The passion that you want to go on life, facing new crises and many more crises coming. You're doing not only for yourself. If you only think of yourself and your family, you give up.
Yes.
I have money already and that's it. But we try to convince to them that you are here only for yourself, or you are here for your hometown, or you are here for your country. If you believe that you can have power to change, you have power to make a more secure future for the future, you have to learn there is no green road.
No, there isn't. There absolutely
there
isn't. No.
There is none.
And I want to remind you in the audience, I did ask you in the morning to participate. I hope you will. So do send in your questions, and I'm going to keep a close eye on the monitor. If you have any questions for our panelists, I know they'll be happy to answer it. And also get your phones out, because I'm going to come to you in just about 2 minutes with a polling question. And now Thailand has this unusual situation that you actually have a lot of women in the workforce. But one area where this falls short typically is tech, right? Narisa, tell me, you've started this fintech company. It's a young fintech company. How much of a gap is there between women in the workforce in Thailand and women in tech in Thailand?
Your question is how women in tech in Thailand, isn't it? Because I live in the UK, but I was born here. So it's very, very difficult for me to start a fintech company. And the challenges I have.
What was the most difficult bit about starting a fintech company for you?
Okay, fundraising is very tough for me. Funding. I started from bootstrap, because we save enough to do bootstrap, and also 2 angel investors. And we have about $500,000 to start up a business with a prototype and get the license. And after that, we try to do crowdfunding. And after crowdfunding, we have to do pre-Series A. So talk a lot to VC and potential investors. And as you know, 2% of the funding from VC goes to the woman, and 98% go to the male.
The numbers are amazing, 98% and 2%. I mean,
I didn't feel it before when I worked in the academy or corporate. But I experienced myself when I talked to a lot of investors, mainly like venture capital. The question that they have for me, I feel, I might be wrong, but I feel unbiased, like unconscious bias, unconscious bias. The question they ask me, and sometimes they ask, how are you going to make profits? And then they say, okay, your project is good. We love it, but come back and talk to us when you make a few millions per month. How could a startup, this is a few years ago, can make a millions in the beginning and come back to them? So I found it very, very difficult. And the other challenging that I have is I feel that after the financial crisis in 2008, our financial ecosystem is characterized by the one with mistrust and suspicion instead of trust. So I feel that we have a challenge of a lot of regulations, unnecessary regulations, to stop us from scaling up. I just want to know how we can work together. How can we balance it that the regulators and our bank partner can work with us? And I feel sometimes heartbroken when I see that a lot of unregulated company, they fail and acceptable. So that's another challenge for me, fundraising, and also a lot of burdens from regulations and the partners that we have.
Well, in contrast to that, one area where women actually have a really good presence is in banking and financial services in Thailand, right?
Yes, I do believe. It's not that, but I believe that not only in banking. For example, Mr. Link, Bigrim, many corporations in Thailand and many SME, you will find a lot of women in management, high level management level.
A lot of these are in family-run businesses, right?
Yes and no. I would say, according to statistics, maybe women CEO in Thailand about 40%, and CFO 47%, probably the highest. I mean, according to the report, highest in the world. But then again, there is room for us to improve. For example, women on board. That is something that we are still quite low, and maybe because women have no interest in this, but we need to improve. But I would like to touch on what you have said. There is good news that now, on another hand, I'm from Chamber of Commerce, and Chamber of Commerce is working together with the Federation of Thai Industries, Banker Association, in order to groom up the startup, the new business. Financial issue is one thing, but it's not only that. So now we are working on the other pain points that they have. Sometimes it's the management, sometimes it's the confidence, sometimes it's the HR, people skill and whatnot. And so therefore, we believe in order for APEC and for us to grow into the future, we need to go together. But in order to go together, people is most important.
Funding, that's what Narisa said. Funding is most important.
We try to understand, but when we talk to them, funding is one thing, but not only funding.
No, not only funding, but it is important to get off the ground.
So we are now working on this, trying to communicate and understand and support more.
Absolutely. Well, let's turn to our audience and to our polling question. And all of you here, I'd love to know what you think. In your organization, would you like to see more of female mentorship, more facilities for childcare, career coaching, or more pay transparency? Close between female mentorship and more career coaching. Bouncing around a bit. More career coaching at the moment seems to be on top. Does this surprise you?
No.
Why doesn't it surprise you? Tell me.
During the COVID-19 and after COVID-19, I've been coaching or mentoring by someone that I would never imagine I could. I've been coaching by some mentor from the founder of Series. So because we've been connected by technology, so we have a meeting by Zoom, and I've been coaching by them, and I learned a lot by them. We did some pilot study about AI using a mobile, to get AI to understand how we do cross-border payment. Something like that, I wouldn't imagine that I can get the coaching by them. And also, I've been supported by the UK government. This is I really, really need. And I see the opportunity because of COVID-19. They've seen us more. They have a lot of initiative for women founders. So I see the opportunity, I join them. And recently in February, I was selected by UK government through the Mayor of London program to go to the first trade mission trip in UAE. And there are 12 companies, and I'm only the female founder to go to them. And with that trade mission trip, we've been supported by some parties in UAE, and I just set up my company in Dubai recently. So without the support from UK government through the Mayor of London program and other mentors, I wouldn't be able to do it. So this is really, really needed.
We've talked about women in tech, women in finance and business. What about women in politics? Oh. You've had an innings in politics. How do we encourage more women to join the world of politics? And would you encourage more women to join that?
Definitely, there should be more.
Yeah.
But from my experience, I can say that I think in terms of ability, I do believe we have ability. But certain things that we need to, it's not coaching, but I think is the strength of the emotion. Because once you get into politics, you are public figures. And
public figures,
when they talk about you, it's fine. We get criticism, that is fine. But once they start to talk about your private life, about my mother, about my daughter, that is something that very difficult.
Do you think that happens more to women politicians?
I'm not so sure, but maybe that's something that happened to me. But I passed that stage. So I understand why other people might be reluctant, even though they have the ability. But then again, we need to grow. We need to be stronger. And maybe we need mentorship for female politicians and whatnot. I talked to many political parties. They said that they welcome more women, but maybe they said the women might be a bit reluctant to get in. But anyway, we have the ability, and I think we need more women in politics.
That would be amazing. In one sentence, we're almost out of time. I'm going to ask you both. The way we work has changed dramatically, right, as a result of the pandemic. If there was one change you could hold on to that would encourage more women to work, to enter the workforce, what would that one change be? Just one sentence each. What's the first thing you would pick and say, if we stick with this, I know that more women will work? Narisa, I'll go with you first.
Just want to encourage whoever, the women now in the workplace and women who are doing business like me, don't give up. Challenges can be opportunity, and something that you have to feel that your mission and goal have to be worth fighting for. For me, I know that everyone know, my investor know, my team know that after I exit my business, I want to continue doing my volunteering work for homeless and orphanage children. This is something that worth fighting for. So find something that worth fighting for, and don't give up.
Last word from you.
Very similar.
Yep.
Whatever you want your country to be, just don't criticize. You have to be the one who stand up and make the change. And believe in the power of yourself. Believe in the power of one individual. you can make a difference.
You can make a difference. Thank you so much. That's a great note to leave it on. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Come can go out that way. And be back in 20 minutes. So please join us outside for a quick coffee break. Thank you.
Please take your seats. The program will begin in 5 minutes. Please take your seats. Our program will begin now. Please take your seats. Our program will begin now. Please take your seats. Our program will begin now. Please take your seats. Our program will begin now.
Hi, everybody. Please get seated. We will begin shortly.
Please take your seats. Our program will begin now. Please take your seats. Our program will begin now. Please welcome to the stage Omri Morgenstern, CEO of Agoda, and Dilip Rajakarir, CEO of Minor Hotels and Group CEO, Minor International, for a conversation with Bloomberg's Malika Kapoor.
Gentlemen, thanks for joining me today. Now, one industry that has entirely been turned on its head as a result of the pandemic is the travel and tourism sector, right? We've seen so many changes. But at the same time, it looks like things are limping back to normal. I mean, look, we have a packed room here. Many of us have flown in from this event. Which stage of the rebound, revenge travel, rebound recovery are we in? How would you describe where we are now? Omri, I'll let you take that first.
And in 2 words, I'll say we're almost there.
Yeah, almost there.
In maybe more words, I'll say the potential is still big. I mean, if you look at, if you compare what's happening, it's interesting, if you compare what's happening in Asia to what we see, say, in the US or in Europe, I think you see a more cautious recovery in Asia. A lot of it, I think, is sort of what I'll call psychological, in the sense that I think in a way in the US and Europe, there's this sense that the pandemic is over.
Yes.
COVID is now, COVID equals the flu.
Yes.
So, and you behave like that. And I think in Asia, it's still not there. If you go down the street, we are all in Bangkok. If you go down the streets, the measurement I always do is what percentage of the people wear masks. It's not mandatory on the street, but still you'll see 90+% of the people doing that. And not only here, in many, many of the cities in Asia. And it tells you that people are still gradually letting go. There's still a little bit of friction. So where we see in many, many markets, the numbers are higher than 2019. But it's still, I think, we have a way to go.
So we're still limping back. Dilip, how would you gauge where we are, where the travel sector is now?
I think, to be fair, we have just started.
Right.
I think the hype is yet to come. I would say we are seeing a very strong demand coming through Europe, through Middle East, through the Maldives and all that. And Asia, we are seeing quite a strong rebound, but I feel the rebound will be much, much stronger, because Asia has always been the destination in terms of travel, because of the proximity of the Chinese. And okay, yes, the Chinese are not traveling at the moment, but you have the Indians, and like say, if you take Thailand now, the Middle East, and especially if you zone in on the Middle East, there's a lot of Saudis now coming in. And people having all the functions, all the meetings, the incentive business, everything has come back really strong. And last year, I was in Europe in an IHIF conference, and there was someone who asked me the question to say, when do you think we will rebound back to 2019 in terms of travel? And I said, we should rebound by 2022. And I had other panel members on the panel, they said in 2024 and 2025. I said, that's the problem, because you guys are in Europe, because you really sometimes don't understand how travel has evolved so fast. And if you look at Thailand, for example, Thailand has faced many pandemics. I think we are the experts, and we've had pandemics, we've had weather issues, we've had political issues, you name it, we've had everything. But saying that within 3 to 6 months, tourism always comes back quite strong. So I would say, looking at what's happening today and looking at the demand patterns like in Asia, I think tourism is going to come back much stronger.
It is. Okay, you mentioned China, and the finance minister this morning, he talked about the importance of China opening up so that tourism picks up, which of course is one of the main drivers of Thailand's economy. Can we really see a recovery in travel and tourism until the Chinese start traveling again? Omri?
So I think my view is that, and it's surprising because maybe 6 months or 9 months ago I wouldn't tell you what I'm about to say now.
Okay.
I'd say this is the pudding, in the sense that in many countries, I think countries that are doing the right things, and again we took Thailand, Dilip mentioned Thailand. I think Thailand, the Travel Authority of Thailand, TAT, as a country, Singapore is another country that are doing the right things throughout this entire pandemic, and you see the numbers coming back. You see the numbers, I can tell you, in places like Thailand, the numbers are either very, very close in terms of inbound travel, either very close or even slightly above in certain sectors than the numbers we've seen before. Domestic is way above that. So I guess what I'm saying is that you can't, I think, yes, there's definitely a lot of travel to be made, even relative to 2019 without the Chinese traveling. But once the Chinese start traveling, then I think it will explode.
Dilip, talk to me about domestic travel versus international travel. International travel still hasn't really caught up, has it? So tell me about the different, how much of a gap is still there?
I think there is quite a bit of a gap between domestic and international today. The main reason, so in most of the ASEAN countries, is that there is a lot of vagueness in terms of travel. Like say, for example, I still have people who ask me, when you come to Thailand, do we have to have the vaccination certificate? Do we have to have the insurance? Do we have to have these documents before we travel? All that was eliminated in July, but I think the messaging hasn't been strong enough. And, different airlines interpret in different ways. And the other biggest challenge we have is that in Asia here is that there's not enough inbound flights coming in, because most of the airlines have cut back on their schedules. So in the old days, when you have 5 flights or 10 or 20 flights a day, that's been reduced to 2 or 3 a day, and sometimes to some destinations, like 1 a day. So we have some places even here in Krabi and places where used to be so many flights a day, and now there's only few a day. So until the airlines actually put their planes back onto travel, and until sort of there is clear path in terms of communication, in certain countries where, travel is now back to where it is, and you don't have to, wear a mask, and you don't have to do all these things. It's going to be a little bit slow, and the long haul will be the last to rebound. We're seeing domestic very strong. We're seeing meetings, incentives, and the conventions business also coming in from the regional hubs quite strong as well. But long haul is a bit slow.
You're right. I mean, you talked about planes and not having enough flights. And of course, that then has an impact on flight prices, right? Yeah. Traveling isn't what it used to be. It's nowhere near as glamorous as it used to be or as fun, right? Let's turn to the audience. Do get your phones out. And I want to poll you. And I want to just get a sense of what you look for when you travel, right? So what's the priority for travel these days? Look at the answer. There we go. So clear travel immigration rules. We need some of that, right?
Yep.
Come on, we do need to know, because
exactly.
when I'm traveling, right?
I could have predicted that.
Wow. There we go, right?
No,
no, see.
There's a little bit.
Someone heard me, right?
Yeah.
Are you? So you're not surprised at all seeing this result?
Well, not so much. Not so much, because I think. And by the way, I think that I mean, there is, inflationary pressure has something to do with that, especially with the currencies fluctuating and all of that. I know it's not easy for many, but it's also and by and large depends on. I think on the airlines, the flights are a little bit more increased because of the lack of supply. I think on accommodation, they are relatively in similar numbers that we've seen in 2019. I think it's more that price is such an amazing driver. And I think one of the things that we are thinking about day and night in Agoda, if you stepped into an Agoda office and asked what's the most important thing for the customer,
yeah,
survey 10 engineers, they'll tell you price, 10 out of the 10. And
right, exactly. And what they're talking about is we didn't say prices for airlines, right? It's also prices for hotels and for hospitality. Have you had to tweak your business models or cut prices to lure people back to your business?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think COVID has been a wake-up call for most businesses today. And of course, we were one of the recipients of that hit. And post-COVID, actually, we had to take quite a few initiatives to almost restructure the business and the hotels in a way where it doesn't actually really affect the guest experience. Because that was our main thing was to make sure that the feel and the touch points on the guest experience was never compromised. But the other things we had to do new things because the whole travel pattern changed. Correct. The customer segmentation changed, the geography changed. Today we talk about generational travel, yeah. 2 or 3 generations traveling together. We talk about B-leisure. We never heard B-leisure in the old days, business and leisure together.
Right.
We talk about slow travel, people wanting slow travel, like whether it's the trains, the cruises and stuff like that. And then we talk about luxury travel as well. And for us, I think luxury is not about, the glimpse and the glamour and all those things. It's all about experience. As long as the guests have a fantastic experience, which is a storytelling experience where they can talk to their friends about it, I think that's where then you've hit the nail on the head.
That was a very honest answer, Dilip. And you said you had to make changes. I'm guessing there were changes sort of behind the scenes because you didn't want it to affect the guests. Yes. Can you give us an example of a change you made sort of backstage?
Quite a bit. Technology.
Right.
There was a lot of transformation done. Even on the back of house, we used a lot of AI to transform some of our systems into automation. We had to automate systems and all those things. And then on the guest side, we tried to make our guest travel a little bit seamless. For example, in Europe, we introduced what is called Fast Pass. So Fast Pass is you can check in online, you can come to your hotel, you get a QR code, you open your room, you get into your room, and then you check out. You don't have to stand in the queue or anything. And it's a very seamless experience from a guest perspective.
It's a seamless experience. I'm not so sure it's the nicest experience because I did this earlier this year. I traveled to Germany and it was the same thing. I booked my hotel online. I got there. I was told to download an app. I checked in with my phone as a key. You want to order room service or get something, it's all on the app. And I missed that, I missed someone saying, Welcome. Welcome, Mrs. Kapoor. How are you today? Do you agree with me? Just a show of hands. Do you miss that?
It's true.
Well, not that many people agree with me. Maybe they all prefer they have the leave me alone approach. Okay, but speaking about AI, Amri, we've talked about the importance of seamless payments and how technology can be used to facilitate that, right? So have you had to make changes in that area? How are you using technology?
So our business is technology, right? That's the business, the heart of the business. And I think there are two things here that are important. One is the overall experience, and you touched a little bit on that. You want to feel connected. Now, I think nowadays connected is a lot of times associated with people. You need the person at the end to feel the connection. And I think for many, many more years, it's probably going to be the case, but you'll be surprised over time how many of those functions you'll find AI doing, including the feeling of connectivity, connection, and the days in which people have relationships with AIs are maybe 20, 30 years into the future, but I for one I think those days will come. The other thing is removing what we call friction. And I think this is what Dilip is talking about. It's making the experience easier. It's taking the things that are complicated and removing them. An example is when you land in the airport, should I draw money, local money or not? Yeah. Should the taxi accept my credit card or not, if I even have a credit card? Should, like all of those questions, how do I pay? What do I do at the reception? What forms do I need to submit? What happens if my flight got delayed? Wait a second, what happens to my hotel? What happens to the attraction all of those things I think technology can solve and make it frictionless. And I think there's a lot to go there, and we're very committed to that revolution.
Dilip, what would you prioritize? What would be the first thing you would like to see made more seamless or frictionless that you think would actually make it easier for people to travel now?
From a travel perspective, I would say, the whole booking experience and getting to the hotel and having enjoying that time, staying in the hotel, and also experiencing, we've gone into wellness, spa, F&B, food and beverage concepts and all those things. And that's what the guests want to have. They want to have an experience, something similar or something which is better than what they can have at home. And they want to have something which is a bit more storytelling, a bit more linked to the culture, a bit more sustainable as well. I think sustainability is becoming quite a top on the agenda in terms of the guests. Yes. Not just the guests, the employee, our team members, everyone, how they think as well. So I think that's important for future travel.
What about flexibility? That's a theme that keeps coming up whenever we talk about the new world after the pandemic. We want flexibility when we work, but we also want flexibility when we travel. And I know when I book a family holiday, I ask the price, and I also ask, is it refundable? What's your cancellation policy, right? How do you deal? I'm sure you get lots of queries about that.
So those are to your question, those are the three things that I think are the most important. Price, first price.
Yes, yes.
Then there is flexibility, and we talked about friction.
Yes.
Flexibility, if anything, is a trend coming more and more stronger out of the pandemic. And I think what we started doing is, as a business, we are always dependent on our partners.
Correct.
Allowing or not allowing for the flexibility. One of the big changes that we had to do is to realize that we have to, in certain cases, we have to take the risk on ourselves, meaning sometimes the partner will provide a rate that is non-cancelable. Mm-hmm. But we need to take the fact that we have a lot of bookers and we may be able to resell that and then allow it or put it in front of the consumer as cancelable, taking the risk on ourselves. That's one example. Other features like
so you're
allowing
absorbing
customers,
that risk yourself.
Yes, allowing customers to freeze the price. So if the prices go up, we absorb the cost, right?
That's risky.
That's risky. So you gotta have a lot of scale. We talked about AI in order to do that, and it's a risk type of game. But again, with the right, those are the types of things that technology can solve. And I think those types of things are becoming a must in travel if you want to be competitive. And I think we are doing it, and you'll see a lot more players doing more and more of that because this is what the consumer fundamentally needs. It's all about price, flexibility, and take away as much friction as you can.
And of course, as we're beginning to talk about the recovery and the rebound, etc., we have this cost of living crisis, we have inflation. How concerned are you about that? Is that going to be just another whammy on the travel sector when you least, and travel and tourism sector when you least need it, Dilip?
We are, to be honest, we're not really concerned because I think I always say to people, just worry about things which we can control, and
Like
don't worry about
holidays.
things which we cannot control, right? We've lived in an era where we used to have interest rates of 15, 20, 25%. Money is not cheap anymore. Labor is not cheap anymore. We know that. So now we need to really go through that change process to ensure that we adapt to this thing. Otherwise we'll be sitting here and talking about inflation, talking about unemployment, and talking about all the issues which have the political situation in certain countries and all this. I think we just need to forget all that and just plan for the future to say, okay, how can we overcome some of these challenges, and what do we need to do now so that we build a sustainable business moving forward.
And then we can all plan our next wellness holiday.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for your time, both of you. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Very much. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go out that way. We'll go out that way.
Please welcome to the stage Alexander Feldman, President of Boeing Southeast Asia, for a conversation with Bloomberg's K1 Ha.
Asia Pacific, of course, has dominated the aviation market globally pre-pandemic. But this year, we're going to see perhaps a tidal change here because we're expecting that Asia Pacific will be coming in second to Europe because of what we're seeing with the slower recovery in the aviation market as well as China's closed borders. Alex, I wanted to ask you, obviously, we talked earlier, we're saying how Asia is now about 50% of where it was pre-pandemic. Southeast Asia, I think, is doing better, but give us the overall outlook for APEC in terms of aviation. What are we looking at?
Well, we are looking at recovery. We're probably overall in Asia looking at 2023, 2024, maybe later. It all depends on China because Asia is so dominated by China. We've got to remember that Japan and Taiwan also just opened up within weeks of today, and it's really key. But if you look at Southeast Asia, and that's what I'm responsible for, so that's what I can talk to more readily, we're at 70% recovery from 2019 levels. So Southeast Asia is booming, partially because of almost all the countries are open except for maybe Myanmar or other places that maybe we're not rushing to go to. But I was just in Cambodia at the ASEAN Summit. I went to Bali to go to the G20 and B20, and my planes were packed all directions. Not only with people going obviously to those summits, but also with tourists.
That's right. And I noticed the business lounges. They're packed as well.
They are almost overpacked, and that's one of the challenges that we see is that the airports and the airlines are struggling to meet the demand that is out there. So the demand is pent up; that's there. But a lot of the airport lounges aren't fully open, and we see lounges that are more packed than ever, and you see fewer flights. And we talked about price in the last panel, and that's an example of demand outstripping supply. And unfortunately, a lot of the airlines let staff go, but they also put their aircraft into mothballs, and it takes a little while to bring those aircraft back. They're not meant to sit for any length of time, let alone years. So we've got some challenges in front of us, but I'm confident that this region can meet those challenges.
And of course, despite those challenges, still lots of upside, especially here in Asia. Tell us a little bit about the factors, the growth factors that's really driving the growth that we're seeing here in Southeast Asia.
Well, again, since we're sitting here in Thailand, I really want to look at Southeast Asia. We've got a market of 660 million people, mostly young. The median age is just over 30 years old. The majority of people in this region are under 35. In fact, 380 million people reside here in ASEAN. And we throw out these numbers all the time, but 380 million people means that you have a young population here in this region that's 20% larger than the entire population of the United States. So you've got this incredible growth factor. We've got open markets, open skies here in ASEAN, and domestic travel is coming back first, as you probably know, but intra-ASEAN, intra-Asia travel is the next to come, and the long-haul international is the slowest to recover at the moment. But those young people will drive engagement, and you got to remember that Southeast Asia sits next to the first and second largest populations in the world. So when China comes back online, you're going to see this region very quickly rebound and very quickly come back and surpass 2019 numbers.
What's really surprising to me, certainly when you travel through Southeast Asia, you happen to talk to a passenger, you see passengers who obviously are traveling for the very first time, and we still see so many of that throughout the region.
We do, and I got to hand it to the governments of Southeast Asia and ASEAN as an entity has really opened up the possibility for low-cost airlines to develop and to thrive. And you've seen many examples from Vietjet in Vietnam to Scoot in Singapore, and quite a number here in Thailand, Smile and others, really servicing a market that couldn't, by price, is price sensitive, but also wants to travel and hasn't traveled before. And it's really exciting to see. And even now when I travel from Singapore, a lot of times I can't get on Singapore Airlines because they're oversold, and I have to use Scoot, and it's a very different experience, but it's a great experience, and the Scoot flights are completely full as well. So it's incredible.
That's great. We talked about bright spots. Let's talk to some of the challenges. You mentioned, for example, capacity and just not getting enough flights, not getting enough planes up in the air right now because they're mothballed. We obviously have a problem with workforce as well. I mean, we experienced a pandemic, flights were shuttered, no one could travel, so you had to lay off staff, you had to lay off pilots, you had to lay off airline attendants and airport staff. Where are we now in terms of workforce, and how do we start to get those people back?
Well, we're still struggling, and the airlines of the region were in need of more staff even in 2019. We've got a huge demand for pilots, for technicians, and for flight attendants. A lot of them, as you said, were furloughed or laid off and went and found other ways to support themselves. And a lot of them are very happy in those other ways. They're not traveling, they're not working crazy hours and being stressed, so they're not necessarily coming back now that the demand is there. So that's a double problem. One, you don't have your skilled and experienced staff coming back, but secondly, you have to train everybody, and you can't train everybody on a dime. So, we've got flight schools and others that are training pilots, but it's not like you can, put someone in today and get them out tomorrow. So it's going to be a challenge for the region for a little while to come. In addition to, supply chains are also challenged in terms of OEMs like ourselves. Yeah. So we're not producing as quickly as we would like to in terms of our planes.
How in terms of that production, what do we need to get that back up, and how
well, it's coming back, but everybody is struggling with labor and the supply chain. So I think it's coming back, and assuming that we can keep the momentum and that the recession doesn't slow us down some more, I think it'll be back somewhat quickly. But we're learning about supply chains and redundancy and a few other things. So.
One of the things you mentioned, of course, is with a workforce is pilots as well. We are experiencing a pilot shortage across the globe. There is now talk, and I think support from plane makers as well as the regulators to try to tease out the feasibility of having just one pilot in the cockpit rather than two. And during the break, we also mentioned about autonomous flights as well, which is, interesting prospect. I mean, obviously, it'll save the airlines lots of money, but at the same time, customers and passengers, I mean, there's some resistance to that. Now, I'm wondering how Boeing...
the psychological barriers are probably harder than the technological barriers. Boeing is an investor in a company called Whisk, which is developing autonomous air taxis to take people initially from airports to city centers. I think we're on version 6 now. And I've seen it fly myself, an earlier version. It's pretty incredible. But it's hard to imagine for some people to get into a flying machine that doesn't have a pilot and doesn't, and takes off and lands by itself. So I think psychologically it's going to be harder. The technology is there. Obviously, there's a lot of things we'll have to work through with regulators and flight routes and making sure that drones and other things don't get in the way of passenger moving autonomous vehicles. But the technology is there for single pilots. Again, it's really about where the regulators and the general public feel comfortable.
Do you think that single pilot as well as autonomous are going to be developed concurrently, or do you think first we'll start with one pilot, in the cockpit, get people used to that idea, and then autonomous?
Obviously, I can't predict the future, but at Boeing, we're working on both concurrently, and we'll see different things. I think for maybe a small 4-6 person air taxi, maybe we start with autonomous. Although a lot of people are working on similar versions with a pilot. And for larger airplanes, I think it might take a little while before we're ready to put 100 plus people on an airplane and send them with an autonomous pilot, or even a single pilot. So.
Yeah. Well, we're certainly seeing capsules, boost people into outer space, all autonomously.
We had
right?
a great Artemis launch today. So we've got a rocket that's going around the moon as we speak. So yeah, I think you're going to see a lot of that, and that's where we're going. That's where we're headed. But again, we're all used to having pilots. We're all used to seeing a person. To the last moderator's point, it's nice to be greeted by an actual person. So we'll see where it goes, but that'll be up to our customers and our friends. But Boeing is taking the technology and getting it ready for when the public and the regulators are ready to accept it.
Great. I know obviously the industry has some very important goals when it comes to sustainability. And the aviation industry has pledged that it wants to be carbon neutral. Yes, exactly. Carbon neutral, zero emissions by 2050. So how do we get there? Because there's certainly a lot of concern that sustainable jet fuel, we're not quite there yet with production numbers. How do we get around that?
Well, we have to do it together. Obviously, if we're going to get there, it's got to be everybody involved, and governments have a role, and the manufacturers have a role, and certainly the airlines have a role. But at Boeing, when we look at it, and we're trying to be a catalyst for this change, we look at it in 4 aspects. First and foremost, fleet renewal. I mean, we think that our modern airplanes are somewhere between 15 and 25% more fuel efficient than the models that they're replacing. The second is operational efficiency. We've got technology using big data and AI to help airports and airlines and the pilots fly more efficiently and just use the fuel that they're using in a way that is very specific to where they want to go. And I think that's really important. And of course, the big opportunity in the room is sustainable aviation fuel or renewable energies. It may not only be sustainable aviation fuel. At Boeing, we say it's SAF and, not SAF or. But that's really the opportunity. If you use 100% sustainable aviation fuel to power your airplanes, and that can be done today, we've shown that through real flights, that would save us about 80% of carbon emissions. So that's really significant. The problem with SAF is there's not enough of it in the world. There are not enough refineries, and we haven't really dedicated the feedstock to make it happen. And it's a biofuel, and the feedstock in Asia, in Southeast Asia especially, is here and plentiful. But we need to work with governments to make it effective and to bring down the price. Because right now, one of the barriers is that there's not enough supply, so and there is demand. Everything that's supplied is used, but the price is way too high, even above today's higher prices for Jet A fuel. It's still significantly double-digit percentages higher than Jet A fuel. So we'll have to work with governments to incentivize both the airlines and the producers to make SAF, and we'll have to work with the energy companies to try and ensure that the SAF that's produced here in Asia gets to the airports, and that you need airports to make sure the infrastructure is there. At Boeing, we've said that we will make sure that all of our planes are 100% SAF compatible by 2030, which is a really important thing. We can fly right now, but we're making sure that the hoses and the infrastructure around the hoses are sustainable and compatible with both Jet A and SAF being put in and out of planes. And many operators in Europe and in California are starting to use a blend of SAF. It's usually pretty small, under 5%, to power their planes, and that's been done by regulation.
Well, that is good news. I mean, 2050 at the same time seems like it's way off, but we know that we'll be right there. And there is concern whether or not we're hitting at least the goalposts. What is your sense of where we are in terms of 2050 and where we are
well,
now?
I think we have some ways to go. I'm not an expert in sustainability, but the issue around SAF is one of the key ones, right? So 15 to 25% savings on fleet renewal, 10% on operational efficiency help, but this is the 80% when we get to 100% SAF that really makes a difference. And 100% SAF is significantly off. 2050 is far enough that I think we'll hit it. But it's going to take a lot to get there, and we're going to have to work with industry and governments to get us there.
What about the role of consumers? I mean, obviously we saw in that polling, people, when they travel, they really want to, they're so price sensitive, they want to pay as little as possible. I mean, are consumers willing, are they going to be willing to pay?
Well, that's a $20,000 question. Hopefully we can bring SAF prices down by increasing the supply to meet the demand. To a price point that's compatible and acceptable to the consumers. But I think there are a group of consumers, certainly the business travelers, that may be willing to pay more if they can get things like carbon offset for their travel and a higher priced ticket. So we'll have to see on that, and that's up to our airline partners. But we've got to get the fuel availability up first.
Great. We've just emerged from the pandemic, and now, of course, ahead we're bracing most of our markets for economic times that are going to be turbulent again. What's your outlook for aviation during this very difficult time, and especially for Boeing and Boeing's growth in the region?
Well, in Southeast Asia, we're very optimistic. In Asia as a whole, we're optimistic. Obviously, a lot on Asia depends on China's opening. Risk of recession, risk of economic downturn certainly hurts our airline partners, and therefore, is challenging for others as well. But, we're optimistic. This region, as I said, has the first, second, third largest populations in the world. And that's good. And they're young populations, and they want to travel. We've seen that prior to 2019. We're hopeful, and the G20, we're hopeful that the governments don't forget about the pandemic, do something to make sure that, everyone says it's when, not if, but hopefully it's when, a long time from now, the next pandemic hits us, we'll be prepared and we'll be coordinated. One of the biggest challenges to travel is that every government in the world had a different policy, whether it was, what you had to do to before you came, after you came, or, what app you had to download. I think I have like 15 different apps for 10 countries in Southeast Asia, and maybe that's an exaggeration, but it is challenging. So we want to see governments coordinate, and that's what hopefully will come out of today's meetings at the G20.
Great. Well, that's a great note to end on. Thanks so much, Alex Feldman.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage Karan Bhatia, Vice President of Government Affairs and Public Policy at Google.
Southeast Asia's digital economy is growing into a $200 billion market in 2022, and that's actually a whole 3 years earlier than predicted despite the pandemic. That's according to this year's Economy Southeast Asia report, sponsored by Google, Temasek, and Bain. And in the last 3 years, we've seen more than 100 million internet users in Asia come online for the first time. So very dramatic numbers. At the same time, we are seeing headwinds facing the region's digital economy, as well as risks to an open internet. Thank you so much for your time, Karan.
Great to be here.
Obviously, we saw during the pandemic, all these businesses go online, double down on meeting customers online. And I wonder if you can talk about, post-pandemic, what we're seeing in terms of how folks are leveraging in this region the internet, tech, and all these new platforms to help recover.
Well, look, I think the statistics that you pulled out of the report that we were proud to be part of sort of attests to the fact that the pandemic certainly saw a spur in the adoption of digital technologies, going from 100 million increase, so going from roughly 325 to 425 in the course of 3 years is a pretty dramatic increase in just the region. But it's not it's not arrested by coming out of the pandemic. What we're seeing instead is the further evolution of the technology. There are parts of the region that were not connected that now that they are growing in their utility, in their use of the internet. And we're seeing other communities that heretofore haven't been connected that are starting to come online. So really the base of the pyramid in many senses is now leaning into the internet, becoming connected. And we think that's a fantastic thing. I mean, the enhanced opportunity, the inclusiveness that that's generating in the Southeast Asian economy is terrific. So look, thus far we're continuing to see the kind of expansion, the adoption that we've seen previously, and excited about what we see going forward.
Yeah, and we were talking just, with airlines, we're seeing people come online for the first time.
Yeah.
We're seeing people come online with their phones. It's so different here than in many other markets in terms of the potential growth.
Yeah, look, the saturation that you're seeing in the domestic, in the U.S. or West European markets, where there is obviously ongoing expansion of the internet economy, but in this region, you're not only seeing the expansion due to new apps, new services, and so forth, you're also seeing it through the broader adoption of internet connectivity writ large. So ongoing investment in infrastructure, ongoing creation of new user bases, people in rural communities and whatnot who weren't connected before.
That's great. At the same time, of course, we're seeing all this growth, we are seeing around the region and around the world restrictive policies, things, discussions over digital fragmentation and digital sovereignty.
Yeah.
We saw, for example, Russia last year try to install initiatives to really control the internet. I wonder if you can talk about that and how real are those risks, especially here in Asia, and what does that risk mean to the rest of us and to the digital economy?
Yeah, look, if you step back, obviously the digital economy, the internet economy really grew up in a space with relatively, little precedent for regulation, and as a result, expanded substantially. And it's probably not unexpected, and in fact, it's appropriate that governments would be thinking about how technology is impacting their countries, their communities, and think about ways that that balance needs to be struck. The challenge that we're seeing is the one that you've alluded to, which is that regulatory process is taking place in a way that is largely uncoordinated and is really sort of exploded. In the course of the last 3 years, we've seen 1,300 regulations adopted governing the digital economy, the technology space, just in the APEC region alone. That's an average of 1 new regulation a day. And these are regulations that may fundamentally impact how products are developed, how they're innovated, how they're brought to market. Imagine that level of divergent regulation happening in any other industry. An aircraft engine, for instance, that has to function or be built a certain way for one market, a different way for another market. That same set of challenges is what the technology industry is grappling with right now. And, for a big company, a Google, we try to figure our way through it. We consider our mission is to make the world's information universally accessible. And so we work through the challenges of regulatory bifurcation, regulatory fragmentation. But for smaller companies, that challenge becomes sometimes, an insurmountable hurdle. And, left with the choices of having to reconstruct products for certain markets, they would simply say, we're just not going to enter in altogether. And that's really where you see, economies slow down, you see individual users not get the benefits that we've seen derived from the internet. So bottom line, regulation is not only inevitable, but important. It's something that we support and want to be part of. But we do hope that it can happen in a more coordinated way than we have seen happen thus far. And thus the importance of initiatives like the APEC gathering that's happening this week, or the G20 gatherings before, all of which sort of recognize the importance of the digital economy, but the need to have some level of convergence, I think, around what those running rules are going to be going forward.
Great. I mean, practically, what do you think can be done? What is being worked on right now to keep data and the internet and the economy open?
Well, look, I think there are initiatives that we see underway. Recently there was a multilateral initiative around the freedom of the internet. It's called the Declaration for the Freedom of the Internet, which basically laid down certain principles. A number of the governments in this region, as well as the United States, were endorsers of that, which simply sort of set certain parameters around the importance of regulation falling within sort of what those guardrails are. And look, we hope that initiatives like that will be helpful. We hope that there'll be convergence around sort of a common set of principles, principles of non-discrimination, principles of making sure that there's transparency in how regulation happens. At the end of the day, again, to reiterate, big companies like Google are going to be able to figure their way through this. But if you are if you're an app developer, if you're a small company, a small medium-sized business, let's say, that's just developing an internet presence, but all of a sudden you're confronted with 5 different sets of privacy regulations, which we are seeing, around the region. That becomes an impediment. That becomes where the internet stops being the incredible generator of jobs and innovation that it has been, we've seen over the past 20 years, and starts becoming more both atrophying or becoming less innovative. And that's not what we've seen traditionally in this region. We've seen this region being a place where innovation has exploded, including in the internet sector. So again, we're hoping to see some of those multilateral initiatives place sort of the guardrails around regulation and ideally establish some best practices.
And of course, at the same time, we are seeing more restrictions on content and free speech even around the region. Obviously, some governments feel like they need to do that. Some of that is government imposed. I wonder, what is the balance, and I mean, what does it mean also for Google?
Yeah. Well, look, I think the first thing to sort of recognize is never in human history has there been a moment where so much free speech can happen, so many different points of view can be brought to the fore than we have right now with respect to the internet. It is an incredible enabler, and has been an incredible enabler of a diversity of views on topics ranging from politics to society, economy, you name it. And we fundamentally, again, believe that is a good thing. The exposure of people to different ideas is something that we at Google pride ourselves on being an enabler of. We are seeing a growth of restrictions around content. And again, there are some spaces where we think that's appropriate and helpful. Take terrorist content online, for instance, where we have seen evidence of that kind of content, and the industry has actually really stepped up in partnership with governments to take on that challenge. A forum called the Global Internet Forum to Counter Terrorism, for instance, which is the major technology platforms working together to figure out what that terrorist content is and make sure that it doesn't stay online. So there are good examples, I think, of the content threat needing to be addressed and being addressed collaboratively. Where we worry is the growth in what we've seen in terms of regulations that really seek to limit political speech, mostly because it is potentially uncomfortable. And that is a space where we as a company obviously are going to comply with the laws that in the places that we operate. But the question I think we really want to ask is that in the best interest of the global internet community? And is there a slippery slope there whereby, again, the internet fragments in ways and becomes a less useful tool? And so those are the issues, the tough issues that we're wrestling with.
We're obviously seeing here in Southeast Asia so many people access the internet by telephone. We're
Yeah.
seeing 5G, all over the place. But at the same time, we do know that the digital divide still exists, and especially in many pockets here in Asia. How do we, where are we in terms of bridging that
Yeah.
gap for people and making the internet and the digital economy more accessible to the vast majority of folks?
Yeah, it is. I mean, the period of going from desktops to mobile based internet connections has obviously led to this explosion in access. And today with mobile phones being accessible, smartphones being accessible at a relatively low price point, we've seen greater availability. But yes, you're right. Access to the fundamental connectivity continues to be a barrier, and it's something that I think government and the private sector do need to continue to work together on, whether it's on creating the broadband connectivity, whether it's on the fundamental infrastructure of subsea cables, terrestrial cables, data centers. Those are all important spaces where I think we've seen good policies in places allow for greater adoption, but still more to be done in that space. But I also would flag, I think another key enabler of meaningful access, particularly on commercial access, is skilling, is helping individuals who, to this point in time, may not have been trained on how to utilize the internet. Maybe it's somebody who, is a little older and sort of more advanced in their career and is nervous about making that transition. Or children, younger person. So we are deep believers at Google in the importance of digital skilling as being a core component of enabling that sort of broader access into the digital economy. And very proud of the work that we've done in this region alone. More than 50 million people trained in the course of the last 8-9 years on digital skills. Obviously more to be done in that regard, but helping people who previously may have thought that their world was the street that their store operated on, to now understand that they can be connected globally into markets around the world is such an incredibly powerful story, and one that we're very proud of.
Great. I know our time's up, but I just wanted to ask you, obviously with all this economic turbulence that's ahead of us, what's the outlook for the digital economy here in Southeast Asia? I mean, people are spending less, people are concerned about their pocketbooks, and we're seeing people now, go from offline to online and back into shops as well.
Yeah, look, I certainly, there are the same macroeconomic headwinds that everybody sees, but the reality is that the drivers of internet growth seem to be present, and when you look at the medium term, the ongoing adoption of technologies, the indigenous innovation that's happening in this region, the number of unicorns that are being created in the technology space, the growth of developer communities, the growth of creator communities for content online. It's really, you can't help but look at it and think that this is going to be a center of digital growth, digitally powered growth for many years to come. So fundamentally optimistic.
Great, yes. Lots to expect from tech here in the region. Karan, thank you so much.
Thanks so much. Thank you, Juan. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Please welcome to the stage Chauvidul-Aw, Thai trade representative and advisor to the Prime Minister of Thailand, for a conversation with Bloomberg's Isabel Reynolds.
Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us for the last session of the day. As I was just discussing with one of my colleagues over there, we saved the best for last in our session today.
Thank you.
So I'm very much looking forward to our conversation.
Pleasure to be here.
When we were planning the questions for this session, I think we were almost in a different world in terms of geopolitics. I think over the past few days, what we've seen happening at G20, there's a great deal of tension has kind of gone out of the world, I think, which is a great thing to see. But I think there are still a number of potential areas of clashes and conflict. And one of them, I think, is still in the tech industry, if we're looking at the US and China. And I think there are still opportunities for for kind of chip manufacture and high-tech manufacture to be moving around the world. So I was wondering, what is Thailand's plan for taking advantage of that kind of change in the tech world?
Well, we think Thailand and ASEAN definitely will have the opportunity to grow this industry as a result of the supply chain disruption during the pandemic. However, it is how you embrace that opportunity. It's not just about clean water and stable electricity for the chip industry, but also the whole new paradigm of how do you produce the chip without any carbon footprint. I think that will be the key to go forward. I think Thailand has been very adamant in putting our words into action about global warming. If you see that the world has faced altogether the same three crises, which is the pandemic, the war. The first two have a possible ending, but climate change is here to stay with us. If we don't address it, I think we're all going to be facing floods, wildfire, fluctuation of temperature. So what we have done is really to put forward our decarbonization plan, roadmap, and already start executing it. So at the source of energy production, we plan to cut carbon emission by 2030 by 40%, with renewable energy coming in about 10,000 megawatts by 2030. And by 2040, we plan to have 50% gas and 50% renewable, making us one of the cleanest economy in the world, for that matter, with the footprint. So that is at the source of the energy. Ask what are we doing at the street level. You know, our policy of try to entice the Thai consumer to change from petrol engine cars to EV cars has also been very, very pleasing. Up to date, I think the projection shows that by the end of the year, I think Thailand will consume like 30,000 EVs, putting us to be one of the highest in Asia. So hopefully, you know, at the source of power production, and that's also at street level, Thailand will be a clean place to be considering to harness or hub your business of production with no carbon footprint going forward. And our carbon neutrality target of 2050 that has been announced by the Prime Minister is a very real target. So hopefully that we can either reach it by then or sooner. So I think green Thailand recovery is a way to go.
Right. That's good to know. Coming from, I'm based in Japan, so I know a few things about an aging population. But I know that Thailand is also beginning to face a similar kind of a problem. Now, how are you going to tackle that problem, and how will you be able to sort of create the kind of population who can really get into these high-tech industries and adopt those new ways of working?
I think it's a common problem as we live older. We live longer now, should I say. But definitely there are plans to reskill our workers and also to be more automated, to bring in AI and robotics in our manufacturing. So all of that is something that we need to roll out and carry out. But also we have introduced a new type of visa to attract foreign talents, which is a long-term visa, which is a 10-year visa. We call it a long-term resident visa in Thailand, and it comes together automatically with a 10-year work permit as well. So hopefully we can entice people with special knowledge and skills to transfer the knowledge to the Thai people. Not only that, but use Thailand as a place of living, as a place of trading, and a place of innovation going forward. So with the supplement importation of talents, I think that will help Thailand reshape its economy into a less labor-intensive industry.
Right. Okay. Since one of your hats that you wear is as Thailand's trade representative, I wanted to know your latest thinking on this kind of On again, off again. Is Thailand interested in joining CPTPP? And what would be the advantages and disadvantages for your particular situation?
Very much so. I think we have demonstrated that CPTPP may be having some time to consider to get the consensus of all the stakeholders in line. But we have no hesitance in joining IPEF, for example, or RCEP, which is the Asian version of the free trade. But with CPTPP, I think there are 8 working groups at the moment sounding out all the stakeholders, coming up with a consensus for us to have a strong position at the negotiation table and also representing our stakeholders from the effect of the agreement. But definitely Thailand is pro-free trade. But also we want to introduce at APEC also that if Thailand succeeds in our BCG policy and also our green policy, can the product that has been produced by clean energy with no carbon footprint in Thailand, or ASEAN for that matter, can we have no tariffs, in order to encourage people to transition into green energy for their production as an incentive to make this transition quicker for countries like Thailand, who's dead set on a carbon-free world.
You did briefly mention IPEF there. I was wondering, what do you think will be the impact of IPEF on this region going forward?
I think it can only be a positive, a bigger market for Asia, bigger market for the West, who is involved. And I think all free trade agreements is good. In my book.
Spoken like a true trade representative,
yes.
I'm sure.
Yes.
So I did just briefly mention at the top of the conversation the new atmosphere that we're seeing between the US and China, for example. We've seen the summits and we've seen President Xi of China holding meetings with all sorts of US allies and friends and partners and seeming to present a more friendly front. Now, I was going to ask you, what do you think that this kind of hostile atmosphere, how is that going to play into Thailand's economy and the regional economy? But first of all, what do you make of what's been happening at G20? What's your reaction to that?
I think the whole world's reaction is kind of, especially in Asia, is kind of relief, right? That a little bit of pressure has been taken off, the cap has been loosened a little bit. And I think, from the Thailand perspective, we like to see Thailand and ASEAN to be, especially Thailand, we are, how should we say, the most seamless melting pot of Asia, meaning there are no race issue here, there are no religious issue here. Everyone here can live together, even though you're different races, as a Thai. And also our long-standing relationship with the US, 190 years, and also with China. A lot of us here sitting in this room have Chinese blood in us, including me, but I'm educated in the West. So we have a full understanding of the custom as well as the way the world thinks. So I think, Thailand would be a place where you would understand both sides.
Right. Now, I'm aware that you're having a very busy time at the moment because obviously as a senior official of the host nation, what are your expectations for APEC this time? What do you see as being the most important outcomes that you're looking forward to?
I hope that everybody comes to Thailand and the key takeaway on the main theme of BCG is a non-conflicting theme. And everybody can go back and see whether, this is something they can go back and start implementing for a better world. And I think in terms of decarbonization, I think every country is looking at several prongs of attack of how to make the world a better place. For us, we have the renewable energy, like I said, and we also have carbon capturing capability, and we also have hydrogen production that's hopefully will be inked during this APEC, making Thailand a hub for not only just the current energy, but also the future energy needs as well.
Right.
So I think that it's a really, really key. How can you grow the economy responsibly? each one of us as a member of the world, right?
Yeah. Would you say that you're obviously very keen on having Thailand take a very leading position, I think, in the region on these green issues. How far do you think the public is with you on that, and how far do you think you can do this in such a way that it doesn't harm the public or doesn't?
First of all, I think the public will be with us if we can present to the public that renewable energy that we're thinking of doesn't cost more than the present energy, okay? Which I think we're on track to do that. Secondly, if you can see by the adaptation of people changing from petrol cars into EVs, making us one of the highest consumer of EV cars in Asia, that already shows, that people are willing to live cleaner and more responsible.
So do you think APEC, I mean, we have a lot of forums on the environment. We have COP27 still going on at the moment.
Yes.
Do you think APEC, as a kind of very economy-based forum, can be a good venue for pushing forward with these kinds of issues?
I hope so, because the two things have to go hand in hand nowadays, right? If you grow without responsibility, you have no world left. So.
Okay, and what do you think is going to be the most important meeting at APEC this time? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think it will be all the different bilaterals that's going to happen. If you talk about Thailand, of course, it will be our key trading partners that we're going to be meeting with on the bilateral side. So hopefully all of that will come to a result where everyone will see Thailand's case and help us make this transition into a modern and responsible economy.
Right, right. Well, I wish you the very best of luck with the rest of the meeting. Yes, and thank you very much indeed for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage Bloomberg's Malika Kapoor.
Thank you all so much for joining us today at the Bloomberg Business Summit at APEC. I hope you've enjoyed the session, and I hope you leave today with one or two new ideas to think about. A huge thank you to all our speakers and to our moderators, and of course to you for being such a terrific audience. I'd also like to thank our sponsors, our presenting sponsors, Bangkok Bank, B. Grimm, and MQDC, and our supporting sponsor, Taiwan Excellence, for making this summit possible. And if you'd like more information from our sponsors, please visit the Resources tab on our event website. Please join us outside for some networking cocktails. And I have an important announcement about this evening. If you're a confirmed delegate for the APEC CEO Summit and are planning to attend the welcome reception at River Park, we have shuttles for you. The shuttles will leave every 10 minutes between 5:45 p.m. and 6:15, but we ask that you carry your official APEC CEO Summit badge or a confirmation email. For now, join us outside, and I hope you've enjoyed the afternoon. Thank you for being with us.